Dungeon Hunter. Chapters 20 to 40. Chapter 21-24 to 2000 vs 800. 10 days. Yu Hai completely changed. Her confidence rose and she acted more aggressively. Her physical abilities rose to a state similar to a warrior. With a little more help, she could take care of the dungeon alone. Then after a long time, I finally returned to the top floor of the dungeon. I need to find a skill book for Yu Hai. An electric current is flowing through her body, so she needs to move on to the next step. In a previous life, I was a solo person. I did everything alone and tried to get as strong as possible. It took me more than 10 years to realize what was wrong. Now wasn't the time to be stingy. Besides, Yu Hai was very important to my plan. There was no reason to refuse just because of money. I hadn't seen Yi in a long time, but there was no change. She was sitting on top of the dungeon core with a troubled expression. Then her wings flapped once she realized that I came. "Ah, master, why did you only come now? What's going on? The second floor has been broken through. At this rate, wouldn't they continue breaking through the third and then the fourth floor? Already? I had judged that the fourth floor would be impenetrable for the next 6 months. But it was already breached?" Yi nodded at my question. "They gathered quite a lot of people and are rushing. People from an unlikely country. There are also some white and black people. Yi was creating a garden on the third floor when those guys came up and surprised me." Yi kicked the dungeon core with her feet. While creating a garden on the third floor, foreigners had entered the dungeon. 72 dungeons existed in the world and mine was the only one in Korea. Why did they bother coming to Korea just for a dungeon? I thought about it for a while before finding the answer. They are seeking treasure. This was the only dungeon where treasure was unearthed. That gossip had spread across the world and the greedy ones had heard it. How many people are there? Yi moved her hands to draw a great circle. As much as tilde is. Accurately, I don't know the exact numbers. Initially a group of more than 100 people entered. They were also Chinese. How do I know? Yi has scanned and picked up 3 languages. Chinese is one of them. Many people. I acknowledged the seriousness after hearing Yi's words. Yi has seen at least 500 Chinese people. Together with the other humans, aren't there thousands of them? Of those, 200 people had died on the second floor. What about the current situation on the third floor? They haven't engaged yet. The leaders are wary. Status of the creatures on the third floor. There are 5 goblin bosses, 4 kobold bosses, and they all have 200 troops each. There are also 200 orcs. From the third floor onwards, there were goblin and kobold bosses. They had intelligence and knew how to use tactics. Hitting them recklessly would just cause defeat. Impenetrable. I agree. Yi agreed. Even if they had a lot of numbers, many limitations existed. There was no chance if he placed creatures in large quantities. The orcs were in the minority and it would be great if there was an orc lord. However, an orc lord was an advanced creature and required 120,000 points. If an orc lord was placed on the third floor, then all the awakened that stepped foot there would die. The kobolds and goblins would also disappear. Could it be moved to a different floor after the war? However, there was nowhere to place the orc lord. The 120,000 points couldn't be ignored. It wasn't easy to use the points. Apart from the 20% given to the dungeon core's guardian, I needed to use them on all floors. The 1-4th floors were places for the awakened to level up. I could leave the orc lord on the empty 5th floor, but it was unlikely for anyone to reach there, so the summoning would be wasted. I will reserve the summoning of the orc lord. I contemplated for a moment before saying, I have to meet the goblin and kobold bosses. I needed to check their intelligence. Yi, how many points are left now? About 560,000. Did I hear it wrong? It is exactly 562,433 points. When I last checked, I had 320,000 points remaining. In the 2 months I had been away, I had gained 220,000 points. Usually I earned 5,000 points a month. Every time a weak awakened was handled, I would earn 200 points. Handling the elites would earn a little over 600? Humans tended to team up in groups of 8 or 12 people when entering the dungeon. I thought that earning points moderately was good and didn't feel the need to release stronger creatures on the first floor. In my absence, I could gain 600 points with every awakened that died. No, I needed more points than that to build my dungeon. Huh, quite a few people have barged in. A group. I couldn't ignore the power of human unity. Yi flew over and sat down on my shoulder. In addition to the humans uniting, quite a few from foreign countries are wearing gear to sneak in. Quite a few of them were exterminated on the first floor. Yi thinks that it serves them right. Right now there are 800 awakened on the first floor. Won't Master lend a hand? Right now Master is capable of stepping on the humans like ants. Certainly, but, okay. In my previous life, I had rushed out alone. But now I was unwilling. I didn't want to lose the dungeon like I did in my previous life, but I also didn't want to be on the sidelines as the other demons devoured the world. I envied the demons that could move a large number of creatures. Fighting alone on the battlefield couldn't compare to the contributions from a large number of creatures. Okay, war. My dungeon was engaged in a large-scale attack. There were many foreign awakened. They voluntarily entered my dungeon. Then shouldn't I directly go and sweep them away? I grudgingly acted. Confronting them in person wasn't difficult, but it would take away all the fun. It was only in name, but I had received the title of Earl in the demon world. I didn't have any creatures that followed me. I placed treasures on each floor. Humans are quite partial to treasure. They tend to lose their lives over it. Human greed was a strong animal. It was easy for them to die over greed. By the way, the Chinese. Their quantity is different. As time passed, the number of awakened increased. Right now, 1 in 10,000 people awakened, but that ratio would gradually go higher. But China had a large population. Now more than 100,000 had awakened, so 500 people wasn't a lot. Master, there are many points, so shouldn't you release the golem? The golem can take care of the enemies and won't cause trouble to the ecology of the third floor. The plants will also grow faster, so the surrounding scenery will become better. The garden that Yi placed will make the scenery very lovely. Yi gave some selfish opinions. Her goal was advanced creatures like orc lords or golems. However, there were different good parts among the advanced creatures. An orc lord that cost 170,000 points was 50,000 more expensive, but it wouldn't affect the ecology. However, the nature of the golem was too much. It was a destroyer that would wipe out the balance. For now I didn't need it. I will take over the role of floor master. A floor master existed on each floor. It was only of the essential requirements for constructing a dungeon, but I still hadn't arranged such presences. Because I didn't think there was a need to place a floor master on the lower floors. But this time a floor master was required to rally the creatures. A war with many saints on the third floor. I couldn't ask another floor master for assistance, so I would handle such a role directly. I shook my head and said, the creatures right now should suffice. 200 orcs and 1,800 kobolds and goblins, for a total of 2,000. Compare it to the 800 awakened. We have the upper hand in terms of numbers. The awakened on the third floor have a significant level. In particular, 2 people among the Chinese have fairly strong skills. It looks like a rare skill, so won't Master have a hard time fighting? 1 orc could take care of 2 awakened. The problem was the goblins and kobolds. In order to take care of 1 awakened, at least 5 were necessary. Looking at the calculations, it would be a close battle. There were 2 awakened with a rare skill. I hope there is a C. I felt my heart beating faster. I remembered fighting against advanced creatures. I wanted to taste a similar power with my own hands once in a while. Moving units in battle according to my command. Excitement rose up just imagining it. In my previous life, I quickly lost the dungeon and didn't even have such thoughts. Gathering points to strengthen myself. Soon I hit the limit but realized it was the wrong choice too late. In fact, I had experienced a large number of creatures following behind demons after going to other dungeons. First I will meet with the kobold and goblin bosses. There was a shallow smile on my face. The dungeon's third floor. A magnificent view unfolded. About 1,800 goblins and kobolds were gathered in one place. The 9 bosses were standing in front of me. Dungeon Master, I came here with all my henchmen. Kobolds are stronger than goblins. Dungeon Master, I came as well. Goblins are strong unlike the snot-nosed kobolds. Dungeon Master, I am the best. My kobolds are the most durable and strong. The 9 bosses started talking in a display of their personality. It was a funny competition to see who was stronger. 2 hours ago, I used magic to inform them that I was the dungeon master and to gather. The dungeon master's rights were absolute. The goblins and kobolds absolutely couldn't ignore my commands. It is good to see you, I said briefly before the 9 bosses started talking again. I am also pleased to see you. I am even more pleased. I am the most pleased. The bosses naturally had bad brains. They were goblins and kobolds. The 9 bosses simultaneously welcomed me, but there was no rudeness. My goals. I pressed my hand against my forehead. Could I really take these guys to war? Crazy. Anyway, my role was to direct them. Winning a difficult fight would make me feel an even greater pleasure. Humans have come to the 3rd floor. Does everybody know about it? The heads of the 9 bosses nodded in unison. They weren't nervous about the intruders. I know. It is disgraceful. I'll obliterate them. Their hostility was excellent. There was a common enemy, so the troops weren't going to be split apart. Those fellows have entered my dungeon in order to seek treasure. As a dungeon master, I can't condone this, so I am giving you a chance. Condone? Dumb goblin, you don't understand. It means to eat them. No, condone is the name of my friend. I should refrain from using hard words. In the meantime, I had thought that Yi was simple. Rather, now Yi seems smarter. I said with exceptional patience. It means they can't be forgiven. I won't let the humans go. Okay, I also hate humans. I will show you the bravery of the kobolds. Gurik, I hate humans. Unified hearts. However, their motivation was a little lacking. They already weren't seeing the humans as enemies. I needed to increase their willpower. I guess I need a reward. Just like slaves, those without motivation would have their efficiency deteriorate. A whip and carrots. This approach wasn't just limited to humans but any beings with intelligence. I will give a reward to the boss with the most merits during this war. Do any of you have a wish? And they were given hope. The goblin boss on the very left of the line replied immediately. Females. There are only males. I want to spread my seeds. I agree. Under these circumstances, there can only be matings between males. I can do all by yourself. One of them answered and the rest of the bosses agreed. The 1,700 kobolds and goblins gathered here were all males. I had summoned a number of female orcs for breeding, but the goblins and kobolds were pending. Their inbreeding was too complicated and the orcs' reproduction was superior. Of course, half of them were likely to die of birth defects before they turned 1 year old. Meanwhile, the orcs' population would be controlled through hunting. In the first place, goblins and kobolds have the same roots. They hate each other but had to calmly admit it. However, their selfishness means they reject other species as superior. In particular, they might threaten the lives of the orcs, unlike the ale snakes or meat bats on the 1st floor. It was a situation where the orcs still needed more numbers. A proper balance was the most important factor when organizing the ecology of a dungeon. Their numbers will significantly reduce in this war. Not bad. Even if their numbers multiplied indefinitely, they would be reduced during a war. I nodded. Okay, if you eliminate a lot of humans, then I will bring in some females. Keek. I'll work hard. I will catch more than the goblins. I will catch the most. The advantage of these guys lay in their numbers, not their brains. From the beginning, they couldn't even count all of their fingers and toes. It would be a hassle to have those brains follow a plan to kill the Awakened, but I could leave it to Yi. They jumped as Yi popped out with a small laugh. It was an unflattering appearance. We will be organizing the troops from now on. A confrontation was inevitable. If the orcs joined the fight, then the odds of winning would increase. So it was necessary for separate units in order to operate them effectively. I remembered the wars I saw in the past and started assigning the roles to the bosses. The party of 800 Awakened was located at the entrance to the dungeon's 3rd floor. They were divided into 6 groups and gathered at their respective bonfire. They lost a number of colleagues on the 2nd floor, so the atmosphere was depressing. But some weren't affected. The Chinese Awakened. There was a lot of them, so they had suffered relatively less losses than the other Awakened. How? Hen how? Hen equals very, how equals good in Chinese. Ha ha ha. A Chinese person was dancing with an orc skull while the people around were clapping their hands in response. The majority of the dance was like acrobatics. The eyes of the rest were on the dancer. They're having a festival. Daniel, who was sitting in front of a bonfire, spat out bitterly. The American called Daniel had come to the dungeon with 5 people and one of them had died on the second floor. Naturally, it was impossible for him to feel good. Leader, shouldn't we act separately? If we find treasure, then we can monopolize it. Then we won't have to wait our turn. A huge man with red hair like a chicken said. He seemed to have lived a wild life as his whole body was scarred. Daniel shook his head. No, we don't know the creatures and their numbers on the 3rd floor. We can't escape from this group until we check it out. If a more annoying creature than the orcs exists, then we'll be killed on the spot. Do you remember those gargoyle-like monsters in the Middle East? Foreign people had participated as mercenaries when the monster wave occurred in the Middle East. There were other creatures in addition to the kobolds, goblins and orcs. In particular, the gargoyles that resembled 2 meters large eyeballs were powerful. They fired a short-ranged sharp beam that could cut the body as soon as it hit. The gargoyles also had sharp teeth and excellent resilience to attacks. If they were petrified, after a short time their physical strength would recover. Many awakened fell victim to them. Although they were eventually intercepted by dozens of fighters, the thought of them was enough to make him piss in his pants. When thinking of the treasure that exists here, it isn't surprising that creatures more demanding than the gargoyles exist. If there are only 5 of us, then we will definitely be wiped out. Daniel's opinion was valid. As the leader of the team, it was natural for him to worry about the lives of his team members. The chicken-haired man clicked his tongue. But I don't like the Chinese people. They are the Black Society, common Cantonese reference to the triads, the Chinese organized crime. Look at that festival atmosphere after people died from the orcs. This might actually stimulate the creatures instead. I don't like them either. However, be patient. The atmosphere will slowly return. Leader, by the way, is there really treasure? There was only 1 staff found on the 2nd floor. Doesn't it only increase magic efficiency by a little bit? It is a questionable treasure. There are things greater than the staff. The Korean Heavens Will Guild found remarkable things. In particular, the spatial jump scroll would be worth a lot. Just obtaining one of those would make this expedition a success. The spatial jump scroll could really be used a lot. It could be used as an extra life or for malicious things. If it was released at a secret auction, then many people would come to buy it. The chicken-haired man scratched his head. But everyone else will be thinking similar things. That's why all these guys surged into the dungeon. Daniel laughed. Right now humans are greedy animals. In that sense, we can't blame the Chinese for sitting back and watching. All those gathered here, it is thanks to them that we easily reached the 3rd floor. It didn't matter how many people came in, whether it was separately or together. The Chinese or other foreign awakened were capable people. The place they came from might be different, but they penetrated through the 2nd floor thanks to that. Although one of the team members was sacrificed, the chicken-haired man opened his mouth with disgust. I don't know. I just hate those guys. Leader, we should act properly this time. We have to live well for the sake of the dead, Jack. We will do that. Jack was the name of their colleague killed on the 2nd floor. The atmosphere becomes solemn for a while as they ate their soup. Koyok. At that moment, screams were heard out of nowhere. Daniel and the whole team hurriedly held their weapons as they looked in the direction of the screams. The Chinese person dancing while holding the orc skull had a wooden arrow sticking out from his head. Fuck, Chinese. It happened in an instant. The Chinese people stood up carrying weapons. Daniel and his team nervously looked ahead. Karuk, Kiek. At the same time, they could see hundreds of kobolds dripping saliva. The leader of the kobolds was the size of an adult male and had a crossbow aimed. He was the one who fired the arrow towards the dancing Chinese person. Kill them all, Chinese. The Chinese people firmly ran towards the crowd of kobolds. Their appearance was quite different from those seen in a video medium on YouTube. Their attitude was a problem, but the sight of 500 people coming out was certainly impressive. Weak, Pesach. The arrows that came flying were cut by the swords of the Chinese. After the element of surprise was gone, the awakened can easily deal with the sloppy archery skills. Gurik, Kiek. After the arrows were blocked, the kobold boss immediately turned and shouted. It seemed like they were giving up. The kobolds started to flee in an orderly manner. They were followed by crowds of awakened. Even if they failed to get treasures, the cores were still money. It was easy to obtain a number of cores. Leader, shouldn't we go after them? the chicken-haired man said while watching the Chinese run after the kobolds. Daniel shook his head. Our team will remain in place. There is something strange. What does that mean? Those guys are kobolds. Isn't that why they ran away? It is the one in the front. The boss. He knows basic strategy. Hey, leader. He is still a kobold. Once a kobold, always a kobold. The chicken head man was well aware of the levels of the awakened. Even if it was a boss, it couldn't deal with the awakened. I don't have a good feeling. Daniel's instincts were very good. He knew the moment Jack died on the second floor and informed the rest of the members. We don't know the geography of the third floor at all. A great number of people will die going out there. Well, I understand. Understood. I will do as leader says. But will we move at a later time? We weren't going to accompany them until the end anyway. They are only guides to prepare for a situation. We will act separately as soon as I grasp the situation. The chicken-haired man clapped at Daniel's situation. This is why I like leader. Daniel was able to calmly analyze the situation. Richard, you are our quickest member, so I want you to scout. Determine whether it is a trap or not. Okay, Andy, secure the perimeter. Understood. What do you want me to do? A simple thing. Me? What do you mean, leader? The eyes of the chicken-haired man shone. Daniel looked at the pot that was half filled with soup and said, "Eat the soup. There is too much left." The number of those chasing the kobolds gradually decreased. The geography of the cave was very complicated and the numbers dropped one by one as they couldn't keep up the speed. At first there were 500 people, but now only 100 remained. The people in the lead realized that something was weird, but it was too late by the time they tried to turn back. Queek, queek. The awakened were dismayed. Creatures sprung up from every direction. They wouldn't have been surprised if goblins or kobolds emerged. But the creatures that appeared were 200 orcs. Despair appeared on all their faces. There are more than I thought. I used a crystal ball in order to determine the battlefield in real time. I had 2 crystal balls and magic could be used to show the scene surrounding the other crystal ball. The crystal ball showed the battlefield with the orcs. Thus I could view the battlefield in real time from a remote location. It was a magic tool that cost 5,000 point. It is simpler than I thought. I ridiculed the 100 awakened that had followed until the end. They never even imagined that the kobolds would be a lure. They thought the kobolds were running away scared. Most of the awakened that came this far were the Chinese, whose thinking was too narrow. This was the worst result. This is a ridiculously good result for a one-time operation. Now I will slowly bleed them dry. I had the power of my home ground. Furthermore, this operation brought a few advantages. Now, what method would annoy them? The smile on my face couldn't be erased. Each of the awakened had red eyes. The skin at their mouths was peeling. Over the last few days, they hadn't been able to sleep. The goblins, kobolds and orcs roaming around randomly attacked, so they had to pay close attention 24 hours a day. Some of the awakened that stormed off in anger didn't return. Dozens of awakened had died. The number of awakened had dropped below 700. There was a proposal to exit the dungeon, but the Chinese didn't agree. They only received 1 staff, so they maintain an unwavering attitude not to leave. The large black society also helped quite a bit in the battles. To be honest, the creatures were no match for their power. There was still hope. The situation isn't good. However, Daniel's thoughts were different. The kobolds, goblins and orcs are united. Their movements aren't common. Someone behind them? Who is it? They must be very strong to exert influence over the creatures. Advanced demon? Or dungeon master? The situation was enough to cause him anxiety. Daniel had an excellent sense of smell, especially regarding danger. Now that feeling was at its peak. He hadn't felt such apprehension since awakening. Even his time as a mercenary in the Middle East wasn't as high as this. There is something. The opponents haven't lost their leisurely air. Confidence that they can wipe us out anytime. What are they playing at? Have I been careless since the beginning? Daniel had a habit of talking to himself when he was extremely nervous. It was at that moment. Leader? The chicken-haired man asked Daniel with confusion as Daniel stood up. This is the only opportunity to get out of the dungeon. Let's go. What does that mean? We are in front of an ant's hell. Once we enter, we can never come back. The creatures have stopped playing with us. It means the presence behind them is moving. The kobolds, goblins and orcs don't have the patience to kill us slowly. Those guys appear to act independently but are actually cleverly linked. Leader. Richard hasn't come back. Richard, their fastest colleague, was sent to scout. In fact, Daniel was skeptical about whether he would return. More than 100 people had entered deep into the dungeon and none returned alive. The only thing that greeted them was death. The body and head was so compromised that he couldn't determine if Richard had died. But everyone knew he died. However, the chicken-haired man didn't acknowledge it. At the very least, he wanted to see the dead body. The chicken-haired man was such a person. He believed in camaraderie. Daniel ground his teeth together. We need to preserve our power when moving. There is no way the Black Society will continue moving passively. We will remove our team here. Our team will be removed so that we don't die. Leader. Richard hasn't come back. The chicken-haired man could only say the same thing. Richard is dead. You know in your heart that he is dead and not coming back. It would be strange if he returned. Richard, shut up. Richard would want us to leave the dungeon. Ricard isn't a fellow with high pride. But he didn't return, which means he was torn apart by the hideous monster. But you want us to wait for him? If we stay in this place, then we'll be torn apart and eaten by the orcs. Leader. I'll wait. This bastard. Daniel's body trembled as he sat back down again. It was his declaration of surrender. The other team members also agreed with the chicken-haired man's opinion. Let's wait a little longer. Their eyes were saying. It was natural for a leader to follow the opinion of his team. Thank you, leader. This is why I like leader. Do you know my heart? The chicken-haired man was in mourning. They had been together for over 10 years. Most of that time was on the battlefield, so they trusted each other more than anyone else. Daniel frowned. Don't speak another word. If you say something, then I will drive my sword into your mouth. Well, isn't leader good? You are so kind. Damn. Daniel placed his hand on his forehead. Kick. Hoo hoo hoo. The remaining team members laughed. The dark atmosphere was lightened a bit. Furthermore, there was still 700 awakened left. Their situation wasn't gloomy. The Black Society started moving. The awakened moved with purpose. Among the 700 awakened remaining, 400 of them belonged to the Black Society. It was natural for them to move in this dangerous situation. Furthermore, they hadn't been doing nothing over the past few days. The awakened with navigation or geography skills had found the place with the creatures. This place was the destination of the Black Society. They would wipe out the creatures on the 3rd floor once and for all. Those monster scum. Today will be their funeral. Kill them. Return everything to them. The awakened had suffered over the past few days, so they were in a poisonous state. In particular, those that lost their colleagues were furious. They wouldn't be shaken any longer. Even now it felt a little too late. The group had argued about when to wipe out the creatures. They wanted to turn back time and reverse their inaction, but it was too late. However, Daniel thought this was much better. If they rushed in at the beginning without a plan, then they would likely be wiped out. Identifying the geography and using the momentum to hit them all at once was better. Nevertheless, I still feel this anxiety. Why? The feeling in his heart was getting stronger. Like he was stepping into an ant's hell. But when he judged it objectively, they didn't lack power compared to the creatures. The only challenging thing about the creatures was their number. No matter how he speculated, he couldn't see the person behind the creatures. Richard, please don't hate us. There had been a chance to escape the dungeon. But Richard was dead. If the ghost of Richard cursed them, then the future would likely be really difficult. However, Daniel didn't stop moving his limbs. Beak. The leader of the Black Society blew his whistle. It was the stop signal. In front of them was a swamp. It was quite wide but not very deep, so they could walk through it. They moved quickly without any disruption to the ranks. They slowly stepped foot into the swamp. Keep your ranks. Slowly, move slowly, okay. When halfway across the swamp, goblins emerged through the swamp. They grabbed the feet of those crossing the swamp. The ones that were dragged away screamed in pain. Didn't they confirm that there was no risk before crossing? But Daniel could soon see the reason why. The goblins were riding creatures through the swamp. Swamp worms. A low-class creature that inhabited the swamp. They normally fed on small insects in the swamp environment. They were small creatures on 80 centimeters in size. Instead, they were very strong. They weren't very threatening to the awakened, but the kobolds and goblins could move on them. An ambush. The ranks were disturbed. It was accurately divided in half. Prepare to fight. Prepare to fight. The awakened prepared to attack the creatures heading towards them from the swamp. Queak, queak. However, they flinched as a frightening sound was heard from one side. The 700 people had been divided into groups of 300 and 400. They couldn't join in the middle. The orcs crossed the swamp to where the group of 300 people were. Keek, keek. The remaining 400 were safe, but that didn't last long. A group of 1,000 goblins and kobolds had appeared. They were completely trapped. Those split apart had no choice but to fight. Guarders more forward. Forward. Protect the damage dealers. Come up. Don't panic. The languages were different, but they could understand. The next moment, the two groups started killing at a fast speed. Damn. Daniel spat out as he wielded his sword. A kobold's head flew through the air. Be careful. The chicken-haired man kicked the kobold that was coming up behind Daniel. The body of the kobold was torn apart. You can leave the back to me, leader. Run into the swamp. Daniel hurriedly shouted. Swamp? Aren't the goblins there? It is a deception tactic. There aren't many of them in the swamp. They want to tie us up here. Anyway, it is better if we quickly join up with the guys on the other side. Only us? Everyone. Okay. The chicken-haired man waved his sword around like it was a toy. It attracted the eyes of the nearby people. Follow me. Puhung. A kobold's throat was cut. The chicken-haired man then winked towards Daniel. I really wanted to try this, leader. Louder. The chicken-haired man laughed before shouting. Me. Follow me. Quote. The chicken-haired man rushed towards the swamp while shouting. Daniel and his team arrived at the swamp. They quickly cleaned up the kobolds and the two groups quickly followed behind when they noticed. 1, 2 and soon 100 openings were created. The kobolds and goblins had small bodies and couldn't cross the swamp without the help of the swamp worms. Before long, everyone succeeded in joining together on the other side. Although there were 200 orcs, there were still 700 awakened. Handling the kobolds and goblins crossing the swamp was like child's play. The situation was reversed. Hope bloomed even more. There was someone who could use his head? I licked my lips. I thought it would be easy to take care of those guys. It wasn't possible to prevent them from crossing the swamp. They had noticed and crossed the swamp. War is difficult. It wasn't an easy thing. I never participated in any war strategies like this. The first bite hadn't succeeded. Still, it was a pity. I had prolonged it for days in order to create a toxic environment. The creatures had deliberately allowed their movements to be scouted. I wanted them to come running. It was only half successful, so I thought it was inadequate. It can't be helped. Anyway, I was satisfied. I was in the best mood for a war. I had yet to wage a war in South Korea, so these guys were like a special dish. They would just die in the dungeons of other demons anyway. It was better that I eat their points. I made a mask out of bones. It covered exactly half my face and caused a feeling of fear. The higher the magic power, the more the opponents felt fear. It was an effect caused by many rare class goods. I wore the half-skull mask and turned to the horse next to me. Inferno had a tail and mane made of black fire. A cousin to the unicorn, it had a long horn on the forehead. It was different from the size of an ordinary horse. The steed had an overwhelming presence. An intermediate creature that was a means of transportation. I thought about the upcoming Demon World auction and purchased a mount in advance. I mounted Inferno and stretched my hand out into thin air. The space distorted and a sword emerged. I will depart. I clicked my tongue while holding the sword. The hands of an orc grabbed the shoulder of an awakened. The strength of the orc was enough to tear apart the floor, so the situation was obvious. However, the Chinese awakened that was caught didn't panic. Rather, it was the orc that was struck 20 times in the blink of an eye. 20 slash wounds were carved on the body of the orc as it dripped blood. It was the work of the Chinese awakened, Lai Feng. He had a rare skill that could speed up the agility of his body for 2 seconds. Even the name of the skill was Accelerate. This strength and stamina would run out after using it a few times, but it exerted absolute power in an emergency situation. Lai Feng immediately cut off the head of the orc. In no time at all, the vast majority of the 200 orcs had become corpses. The goblins and kobolds crossing the swamp weren't a threat compared to the orcs. Victory. Hope appeared in the eyes of Lai Feng and all the awakened. There were still approximately 500 awakened left. Their confusion had quickly turned to defense. They used their numeric superiority to cut the throats of the orcs. Lai Feng checked his body. I can use it once more. Accelerate. It was a juggernaut skill for 2 seconds. Looking at the state of his body, he could only use it once more. A double-edged sword that affected his body. But it was enough. Anyway, the remaining creatures were just orcs and kobolds. Just a little more. Exert yourself a bit more. Victory is right in front of us. Lai Feng exclaimed. At the same time, the surviving awakened flocked to his side. They planned to get rid of the remaining creatures. Took, took, took. The ground shook strongly as the hundreds of awakened moved their feet. The kobolds and goblins were dismayed as they approached. Moving in a line meant the creatures couldn't come readily. Sokyok. More than anything, Lai Feng's blade wasn't dull yet. The rare grade skill wasn't the only thing he had. No matter how tired he was, Lai Feng was one of the best warriors of the Black Society. Every time his blade moved, the head of a creature would roll to the ground. The dungeon was filled with the corpses and blood of the creatures. Even some of the goblin and kobold bosses couldn't avoid death. Kiek, kiek. The creatures tried to resist. But that was it. Even now, their numbers were steadily decreased. Little by little, smiles blossomed on the faces of the awakened. Dagudik, Dagudik, an entirely different existence arrived. Everyone was silent. The description? Yes, like a grim reaper. A reaper-like existence. Maybe it was the reaper itself. A huge steed with a mane and tail of black fire. On top of it was a man. Only half of his face could be seen. The rest was covered by a skull mask. He wore a black cape and was holding a sword in one hand. At that moment, fear rose in all their bodies. It was a similar fear to when they first faced the creatures, but the quality couldn't be compared to that time. Lai Feng tried to suppress his trembling fist. It was so strong that blood flowed through his fist. The air had changed again. Just a few minutes ago, he had been vigorously wielding his sword while thinking of victory. Now he wasn't. The emergence of that man had changed the air. The soldiers were useless when paralyzed by fear. This couldn't continue. Lai Feng felt a strong pressure to reverse the atmosphere. Lai Feng made a decision and moved. He had the accelerate skill. Even some other skills with the rare rating couldn't compare to accelerate. When this skill was used, he could be called invincible for 2 seconds. No matter how confident the man was, he would have no choice but to die after being cut 20 times. Lai Feng looked at the man surrounded by flames. He couldn't be careless. It might be humiliating for a warrior, but he needed to endure for the sake of victory. But Lai Feng didn't know. The eyes of the man had penetrated through Lai Feng. The man already knew everything that Lai Feng was planning. Huop! Lai Feng moved closer to the man and activated accelerate. The world slowed down as Lai Feng moved faster. His sword moved 20 times. The essence of 20 sword strikes stretched out from Lai Feng's body. Lai Feng used his most powerful sword strikes. It is over. From the man's view, Lai Feng was infinitely slow. Rather, he seemed like a turtle. It was over. He won. The man only had an overwhelming presence. At the end of his 20 strikes, Lai Feng's sword pierced through that man's throat. Ah, victory! Now the atmosphere would change back. Lai Feng turned his head and shouted. But no words came out. Why is my voice? And that was the last thought Lai Feng had. You saw an illusion. I laughed as Lai Feng's head fell to the floor. That thing was just acceleration. It was a suicide skill that pushed the brain and muscles. His mind hadn't recognized it even in death. Anyway, that body wouldn't have lasted more than a few years. He would have eventually met a very painful end. It might be a blessing for Lai Feng that I killed him now. Wasn't there one more person with the rare skill rating? Or are they already dead? I turned and looked at the 500 remaining awakened. One orc could deal with 2 awakened. If I counted simply, then there should be 300 left, but such a simple comparison wouldn't work. Plenty have survived thanks to the owners of the rare skills. Unfortunately, the other one already seemed to be dead. The ending of the rest was decided. Genocide. They were like fish caught in a net. There was no reason to spare them. Anyway, they were the ones that came in after hearing of the treasure heavens will found in the dungeon. They were fish that entered my pond. The vast majority of the crowd were now a special dish for me to appease my anger. I wasn't hungry, but they couldn't be allowed to touch my farm. One day I would be taking the attitude of other demons, but not just yet. There were many chances that I could monopolize. I dismounted from Inferno's back while thinking of taking them out. Dungeon Master. A man came forward and kneeled. I knew the language of several countries, including English. Therefore I could understand the man's words. Please calm down and forgive us. We were silly sheep blinded by treasure. Are you crazy, leader? Pow. Squat down. Everyone looked at the man's behavior. He seemed crazy. Please. But the man didn't care. It wasn't a simple fear, as the man's body trembled with sincerity. The man could feel something the others couldn't. I was interested and used mind's eye. Name: Daniel Drew Martin. Occupation: hero, garter, title none. Stats: strength 33, intelligence 41, agility 31, stamina 35, magic power 15, potential 155 308. Uniqueness: none. Skill: insight, XN, second sense, XN. Second sense and insight. The ratings were low, but the combination of the two skills caused a synergy effect. That's how he could see my power. But even if he knew the truth, in their eyes I was just an unusual creature. That's how the man came up with the idea to kneel down. Of course, that didn't mean I would change the ending. It was mere admiration. If you let us live, then I'll make sure they don't bother Dungeon Master again. You will never see us in the dungeon. It is a little bit difficult. There were plenty more people who wanted the treasure in this dungeon. If these people lived and talked about my existence, then the number of people entering the dungeon would decrease. Yes? Daniel seemed surprised. He never imagined that I could speak English. Frankly, it had been a gamble. There was a large chance communication wasn't possible. The gamble was a success. It was true that I found it a little interesting. So I suggested a game. 10 minutes. The time to get away? Color returned to Daniel's face. 500 people scattering. With his skills, he could at least save his remaining team members. However, I shook my head. I will attack for exactly 10 minutes. You will block it. I will stop attacking after 10 minutes. I declared while pointing my sword at Daniel. First of all, yes, you. Quack. Degururu? Daniel couldn't even speak before he was struck by my sword. The game started the moment his head fell to the ground. L leader. 10 minutes. 500 people remaining. I needed to wipe out one person every second. I kicked Inferno lightly. These bastards. Kill. Kill them all. Hying. Inferno started moving. The chicken-haired man came running, but I ignored him. He was the most enraged among all the people. I would place him last on Daniel's behalf. The slightest mercy. And humans became corpses every time I swung my sword. Stop. Stop it. They formed a tight defense, but I pierced through them. I besieged the army. The huge breakwater was neutralized. Swayak. Waak. Flying arrows and magic. I also ignored this. The current level of the awakened couldn't damage my body. Kuik. Help me. Time passed by simply as I stabbed and slashed. The desperate and terrified crowd dropped their weapons and tried to run. However, none of them could escape from Inferno. Inferno was equivalent to a unicorn. Those that tried to escape through the swamp had to greet the goblins and kobolds. At exactly 10 minutes, there was only one person remaining. Out of numerous bodies, only one was alive. How lucky. I kept my promises. But that was different from safely leaving the dungeon. Even he wouldn't be able to escape. I didn't know, but the chicken-haired man was in a towering rage at Daniel's death. Just like the name awakened, his anger woke up the potential in his body. The creatures gradually disappeared under his sword. I held the reins and turned my steed. The remaining creatures followed behind me. The man that was left behind with all the bodies. The man cried out, "Damn, Damon," the man with a chicken-like hair. He was the sole survivor instead of Daniel. Chapter 25 to 26. Dungeon's internal stability. The kobold and goblin bosses. At first there was 9, but now only 5 remained. 4 had died during the war. And the 1,700 troops had decreased by more than half. The war was that violent. Of course, I took care of most of the awakened alone, but a promise was a promise. I considered the number of creatures left and presented them with some females. The just summoned female kobolds and goblins were frightened, but I didn't worry about it and placed a fixed number with each unit. Keek. Dungeon Master. Thank you. Increase the number. Make the kobolds strong. I worked hard. Now I won't be alone. The ones that survived until the end. I sent them away and looked at the points. Points remaining. 1,174,357. I felt more comfortable looking at the message window floating in the air. I gathered 1,000,000 points so I could achieve my purpose at the Demon World auction. The power of advertising. To be honest, I hadn't expected so many awakened to flock here. I simply promoted about the treasure for the growth of the awakened. It was unexpected that I would get such a fervent response from overseas. I was always happy to receive an unexpected gift. I firmly pressed my index finger to my forehead. Should I increase my investment a little more? It was definitely tempting. At this time, 1,000,000 points was a massive amount. No, that amount of points couldn't be ignored even in my previous life. I could even summon the high-class creature, a griffin. Of course, the level of the griffin was low compared to other high-class creatures, but the flames and lightning could be enough to cause a disaster. The current level of the awakened was low, so letting it loose would wipe out hundreds or thousands of humans. One alone would be enough to destroy a small country. There were not any demons at the moment with 1,000,000 points. I could definitely get an advantage in the Demon World auction. In addition to Krasla, I could obtain several other things. If so, using a lot of points on the dungeon would be bad. So far, I've placed 40,000 points on the treasures in this dungeon. If I increase it to 100,000 points, the hidden items will be found by others outside the Heavens Will Guild. I can't just intentionally leave things for the Heavens Will Guild. I've received news from Kim Yong-woo that the other 4 large guilds were recruiting members to raid the dungeon. They would obtain some of the final benefits. Some of the awakened would die from the creatures in the dungeon, but others would obtain the treasure. It was a sacrifice I was willing to take. I have to do it before the other demons notice. They might decide to follow my dungeon. I have to eat everything up. The 72 dungeons were different depending on the nature of the demons. It was the early days, so they were guarding against being too strong. Little by little, they would learn the importance of points and start to raise the awareness with the awakened. My dungeon was highly likely to be their role model. Then I needed to maximize the benefits before that. I planned to use the colorful treasures to entice the awakened. Items as well as gold and silver valuables were placed all over. It is hard. I thought I would die because of these heads. Yi wiped the sweat from her forehead. I had Yi collect and count the heads of the awakened after the battle ended. Thanks to that, Yi was exhausted. If the numbers didn't match, then she had to start again. I listened to her manner of speech. I said with a smile, "Yi, did you decorate a garden?" Jajikum. Yi was startled. I heard that Yi was decorating a garden for me. But she didn't understand why I decided to mention it. Why Yi determined that it is good. This is the modern world. Yi thinks a dungeon should be bright and beautiful. This dingy dungeon doesn't fit Dungeon Master's style. Dungeon Master is great, so the dungeon also needs to look great. Despite stammering, Yi spoke with utter conviction. I lightly nodded. I'm not blaming you. Yes, really? You really aren't punishing me? Yi's eyes became wide. Her wings started to flap again. She had spoken loudly to hide her sins. It was easy to understand her reaction. Yi's mind was better than the kobold and goblin bosses. But that didn't mean that Yi was smart. Her brain was frantically stuck in a corner until I coughed. Can you make it so that creatures don't enter the garden? Of course. A safety zone setting? It isn't large, so Yi can easily set this part. It would be sad if creatures came in and broke the trees. Safety zone setting. He had heard of it before but never used it. But now it seemed necessary. The awakened needed a place to relax. It was a great base to encourage being stronger in dungeons. It was time to earnestly lay out his dungeon. First, bring me to the garden that you made. Huh? I haven't finished yet. No, let's talk after seeing it. Yi turned with a long face. It was an attitude that stated she didn't want to. However, I did not withdraw my decision. Yi seemed to realize this and her shoulders slumped. I understand. Follow me, Dungeon Master. Don't expect a lot. Yes, I didn't have any expectations. Yi pouted and muttered, it would be good if you have some expectations to herself. Of course, I just ignored it. I started to move along after Yi. In fact, the third floor was too wide to walk. A magic circle could be used to move quite a distance. There was a magic circle inscribed in each floor of the dungeon for the dungeon master to move. It was invisible to human eyes and only the dungeon master and spirit of the dungeon core could use it to move through the large dungeon. I had a terrible thought. The size of the dungeon is several times larger than what can be seen with the naked eye. My dungeon is location on the Bukhan mountain, but the size that humans reported is much smaller. The size was awesome when looking at the dungeon with the naked eye. An area of 21 square kilometers and a height of 4,733 meters. It was the size of a major city and had a similar width to Nauru in the Republic of Oceania. In addition, 4,700 meters was twice the size of the Bekdu mountain. Yet not all of it was visible. It was actually much greater than that. It would be crazy to walk around a large place like this. Some awakened had actually starved to death. The dungeon jammed most equipment of modern civilization, so those lost would end up dying. Sook. The patterned red light of the magic circle wrapped all over the place. Soon I could confirm that the surroundings had changed. They were moved to the place that Yi wanted. Kong, Kong. The sound of hammers tickled my ears as soon as I arrived. This is staggering. I was overwhelmed by the view. First, there was the appearance of 5 dwarves hammering eagerly. Yi was authorized to create the dungeon environment and she could give that authority to others. In particular, building features was too strenuous for Yi, so she was allowed to use the dwarves. The problem was the appearance of the garden. It looked more like a strange structure than a garden. At first glance, it seemed like a palace of poo. No, it was the shape of poo. It far transcended my imagination of a lovely garden. Noonam has come? What? Noonam came? Where? Who is that man? Yi permitted the dwarves to see her. The 5 dwarves stopped working and came running over as soon as they saw Yi. Noonam? But the nickname was strange. I could roughly understand the situation from Yi's expression. You guys, didn't Yi tell you to work hard? We did. The dwarves lined up and replied at the same time. Yi's expression still wasn't good. She placed both hands on her waist and said, "But why are you still not finished? Time? Materials? Excuses. You haven't finished making it. Didn't Yi tell you to reduce the time you spent sleeping and eating?" Humans would call this a vicious employer. The dwarves made a tearful face. That is realistically impossible, Noonam. Spare us. I haven't even eaten one meal today. I really am going to die under these circumstances. And Yi bluffed. I guess you haven't suffered enough? Recently the orcs have been worrying about food. Do you want to become the orcs' rice? That. The dwarves closed their mouths with an expression indicating they thought it was still unfair. My eyes noticed the blisters on the dwarves' hands. Yi, stop. I finally spoke up. Yi seemed to be very strict to other people. Then Yi clapped her hands. Greet him as quickly as possible. This is the dungeon master. Your real master. Treat him more politely than you treat Yi. Do you understand? Hyok. Dungeon master. Quickly. Don't you understand what I mean? Do you really want to be chewed up? Master Nim. The dwarves immediately dropped to the ground and bowed. I was at a loss for words at the sight. The dwarves had suffered so much under Yi that they looked at me like I was a monster. Rise. No. How can we dare look the dungeon master in the eye? You are excused from meeting my eyes. Rise. I see. The dwarves were small. They were larger than a fairy but only reached up to my navel. Even if they were excused, there was no chance they could meet my eyes. I convinced the dwarves to stand up. Then something caught my eyes and I flinched. I couldn't hold my tongue and said, "What on earth are you making now?" The dwarf in the middle, who seemed to be the leader, spoke. Noonam said that Dungeon Master wanted to create a resort for a break. The structure that was in the shape of a poo was supposed to be a retreat. I didn't dare think deeply about how Yi visualized the design. It would be interesting if I ever got the chance to look inside Yi's brain. The wrinkles? How long will it take before it is completed? The dwarf peeked at Yi and said, If there are sufficient materials, then 5 days. Pretty fast. We are good at making things. Their faces were full of pride. I nodded. I want to install one that is half the size on floors 1 to 5. The deadline is 1 month. Yi, provide the necessary materials for the dwarves. And you don't have to work like you are now. Really? You will get 3 meals a day and 10 minutes to rest every hour. And in the future, You will get at least 6 hours sleep. I didn't want the dwarves to die before they finished. These conditions couldn't be allowed to continue. At a minimum, I needed to maintain their lives. Oh, Dungeon Master, my master, I truly believe it. They shed tears of joy. They were genuine tears. The dwarves kneeled down and started sobbing. I looked at Yi. My eyes asked, "Did you bully them?" But Yi just pretended ignorance as she turned her head and hummed. Did Yi have this talent? It was slightly embarrassing, but it wasn't bad. The sight in front of me was still surprising. I never entrusted points to Yi in my previous life. The dungeon was quickly lost, so I never discovered Yi's talent. But come to think of it, it was a great whip and carrot. Yi squeezed the people like a vicious owner, and then I would walk in. The environment improved only a little bit, but they would cry tears of joy. It would be good once Yi's talent matured a little more. It would be difficult if the workers kept dying. Yi needed to gain a little more experience in this area. They were summoned with points, so I needed to squeeze every drop of blood from their flesh and bones. 3 meals a day, a rest for 10 minutes every hour, and 6 hours of sleep would be enough for them to survive. The design is a bit strange, but I'm not planning to rest here. The awakened wouldn't care as long as they were safe. They would willingly enter the Palace of Pooh if it meant a place to escape the horrible creatures. So it didn't matter how good the design was. Master, how is it? Isn't it beautiful? Yi asked shyly. Yi and I had moved from the 3rd floor to the vicinity of the dungeon core. The dungeon core was emitting more light, exposing Yi's nerves. I lightly nodded. It is beautiful in several senses. Yi smiled widely. Fortunately, she didn't inquire about the multiple meanings. Yi, comply with what I just said. I understand. However, you don't need to change your behavior. Make sure they work hard like you did up to now. I'll leave it entirely to you. But is that okay? I don't have much time to be present in the dungeon. I will temporarily entrust the dungeon to you. Yi's eyes shone at the trust I put in her. Can I really have such a huge responsibility? Yi, I will be fairly busy in the future. I don't have time for a pile of work. And I will continue to entrust important things to you in the future. If you act like this every time, then I will be quite disappointed. No, Yi would never disappoint, Master. Yi quickly shook her head and clenched her fists. I was confident that I could leave the ecology of the dungeon and the dwarf workers to her. I trust you. Yi entered domestic mode. This will be an opportunity to bring the orcs on the 3rd floor to the 5th floor. I understand, Master. Siong. The dungeon core played a hologram. I was looking at the status of the 100 orcs on the 3rd floor. Many orcs had been lost. Their numbers needed to be multiplied. The first 50 had increased to 200 in 9 months, so these were nasty damages. The orcs had a gestation period of 3 months and gave birth to 5 babies. And they became adults after just 6 months. In fact, normally it would be 1.5 years, but the peculiar mana of the dungeon stimulated growth. The original numbers would be restored after 4 months. It is a little too long. 1 orc cost 700 point. The goblins and kobolds were 35 PT, so the orcs were expensive compared to them. However, it is necessary to add them up to the 5th floor. It couldn't continue like this. I didn't mind the awakened clearing every floor up to the 4th floor. They needed to feel despair once they reached the 5th floor. I looked at the list of creatures that could be purchased. Lowest grade creatures. Goblin 2 LV 35 PT. Goblin 2 LV 35 PT. Ale Snake 1 LV 2 OPT. Meat Bat 1 LV 2 OPT. Slime 3 LV 200 PT. Skeleton 4 LV 50 OPT. Zombie 4 LV 45 OPT. Mimic 5 LV 1200 PT. Null 2 LV 80 PT. Crazy Hound 2 LV 120 PT. Low grade creatures. Orc 2 LV 70 OPT. Mud Golem 5 LV 2000 PT. Puppet Doll 2 LV 90 OPT. Snowman 3 LV 999 PT. Giant Man Eating Flower 4 LV 1400 PT. Sleep Moth 3 LV 1100 PT. Gargoyle 5 LV 1900 PT. Harpy 5 LV 1200 PT. Several windows simultaneously emerged. A significant amount of time was spent cleaning it up and finding the desired creatures. And the universal strength was divided into LV, with the highest level being 5. The lowest of the low-grade creatures were the 2 LV orcs. This was a universal value. But it couldn't be trusted unconditionally. I needed to look at the good points. I should start with the mud golems. The 5th floor would be the place where the awakened experienced despair. There would be such a tremendous rise in difficulty from the 4th floor that the awakened would have no choice but to reverse their path. Or be killed. There were 2 entrances to the 5th floor. I bought mud golems and placed them at the entrances to the 5th floor. 30 puppets were also placed in the surroundings to assist. The puppets were scavenger tools in the demon world. Various metals, drugs, magic and witchcraft were used to make the puppets only follow the commands of the owner. Despite not being agile, they were very powerful and better in combat than the orcs. The harpies breeding are okay. Each floor needed at least 1 species that could breed. The kobolds, goblins and rocks needed to be balanced properly by natural predators, but the harpies' breeding rate was far slower. While the mud golems and puppet dolls were defending the entrance, at least 50 harpies were necessary. I placed 80 harpies on the 5th floor. A total of 260,000 points was used on the internal affairs. The remaining points were a little over 910,000. This was further reduced by increasing the treasures in the dungeon. This much will recover soon. The amount of treasure in this dungeon means that the awakened will swarm like moths. Numerous awakened in South Korea wouldn't take the risk. This was the impact of the guilds and the website. This narrow land was controlled. On the other hand, it was different regarding those from overseas. The awakened sneaked into the dungeon. They were the ones who would replenish the points consumed. This much is fine. Have you finished? Yes. I nodded and Yi shut off domestic mode while staring at me. Why are you looking at me like that? Yi. No reason. I couldn't understand the fairies sometimes. Now I will go. I will leave the rest of the work to you. Please leave it to me. Yi answered quickly, but her face was grouchy. The dungeon core was connected to me, but the fairy Yi was tied to the dungeon core. It was natural that she would be upset whenever I left. Yi was a fairy, but she was a fairy who liked chatting. She needed someone to converse with. By the way, it seems like you need a means to communicate with me. I said with a laugh. I was sure there would be a magic to communicate with Yi if I browsed the store. Then do you mind if I inscribe a magic spell on Dungeon Master's body? You can use magic? In my previous life, I never heard that the fairies of the dungeon core could use magic. They were only helpers. Their bodies had no physical impact, and the role of the fairy was to give advice on dungeon management. I couldn't help feeling interested. Yi wriggled her fingers. There isn't a lot available. I don't like to use it. But Dungeon Master has been very good to Yi. So I asked the question. Go ahead. Where will you inscribe it? That? The lips. I understand. Come and inscribe it. It wasn't a big deal. I also wanted to see the magic of the fairies. Yi flapped her wings as her cheeks turned red. Then all. I hate to say it twice. Do it. Please close your eyes. Do I have to? I wanted to see the magic with my own eyes. Therefore I was puzzled when she asked me to close my eyes. She told me, the magic works better that way. Weird. Fairy magic? However, this was the first time I knew the fairies from the dungeon core could use magic. It was enough to allow her some free range. I closed my eyes. Yi stopped and flew in front of my face for a while. Juck. Then something collided with my lips. I frowned slightly and opened my eyes to see a message window floating in the air. A remarkable achievement, the first person to receive the blessing of the dungeon core's fairy. The title, first to receive a fairy's blessing, has been given. A title. I had the Indomitable Warrior title. But now I obtained a second title. I forgot Yi's actions as I hurriedly checked the status window. Name. Randolph Brigzeal. Occupation Demon Earl. Dungeon Master. Title * Indomitable Warrior. XU. All stats +2. * first to receive a fairy's blessing. U. Magic power +6. Stats. Strength 79. +2. Intelligence 64. +2. Agility 74. +2. Stamina 80. +2. Magic power 82. +8. Potential. 382 + 16 500ths. Uniqueness. Heart of the Hell Monarch has been transplanted, full strength hasn't been fully opened. Skill. Skill combination, R, Mind's Eye, U. Before and after comparison. Strength 79, Intelligence 65, Agility 75, Stamina 82, Magic 84, Potential 375 plus 10 500ths. Strength 81, Intelligence 66, Agility 76, Stamina 82, Magic 90, Potential 379 plus 16 500ths. The rating was also unusual. Unique. A unique title. It was a precious title that increased magic power by 6. The effect of both titles increased my magic power from 82 to 90. Once the stats reached 90 points, it was an entirely different world. Magic power had a deep connection to the power of the magic and control over the surrounding environment. Once magic power was opened up, the demons would be able to feel my majesty. They would shrink back in surprise. In my previous life, I struggled with low magic power and intelligence, but now magic power was the highest. I swallowed and smiled at Yi-Hee. Yi-Hee had wrapped herself into a ball as she felt shamed. She seemed to be waiting for my anger. But the blessing gave me a title, so I couldn't bring myself to be angry. Thank you. The words were strange in my mouth. It was awkward. I never thought that I would one day be sincerely thanking someone. But now was the time to share my gratitude. I couldn't keep quiet just because it was awkward. Yi-Hee sensed my sincerity and laughed. Yi-Hee. It was nothing. Now I can talk to Dungeon Master when I want to. Yi-Hee likes this. Please refrain unless it is an emergency. But a fairy was talkative. If I let her talk freely, then she wouldn't stop attempting contact. Yes, now I am really going. Take good care of the dungeon. Don't worry, and go carefully, Dungeon Master. Yi-Hee humbly lowered her head. I waved my hand as a reply and left the top floors of the dungeon. Chapter 27 to 32. Demon World Auction. I left the dungeon and headed straight for the guild. I had been away for a week, so Kim Yong-woo was glad to see me. Master Nim, isn't it too difficult to get in touch with you? I was standing blankly in the guild master's office. I go where I want and when I want. If you want to support my freedom, then I have no obligation to report to you. Kim Yong-woo licked his lips. Yes, that's true. You come and go like the wind. Master Nim has the power to break any walls in the city. The level of the awakened was slowly rising, but Kim Yong-woo had seen a scene that couldn't be imitated. A person who overwhelmingly crushed an advanced creature. If he wanted something, then he would get it. Kim Yong-woo was sure that his judgment was correct. There was already a huge positive impact on his guild. Therefore, he had to act carefully. Kim Yong-woo didn't know my true heart. Kim Yong-woo just carried himself excellently. This was what allowed him such opportunities. I said with a smile. I know what you are worried about. But don't worry. If you don't pierce my back, then I will continue acting as a Heavens Will Guild member. On the surface. Haha, of course. And Master Nim, please don't say something so scary like you did last time. I shiver every time I hear it. Kim Yong-woo stroked the goosebumps that appeared on his wrist. There was no lie. Kim Yong-woo's attitude was consistent with existences stronger than him. But I could feel assured since there were few with such strong presences among the demons. Did anything happen while I was away? Kim Yong-woo nodded at my question. There are rumors that a large number of foreign awakened who entered the dungeon didn't come back alive. The 4 guilds are planning raids. The National Assembly has passed a legislation regarding the awakened. What do you want to know? I have no questions. 1,000 foreign awakened had knocked on the door of the dungeon. No matter how cautious he was, there was bound to be rumors. Furthermore, I had wiped 500 of them out myself. I didn't know the other parties. But if I didn't open my mouth, the secret would be buried forever. Kim Yong-woo said like it wasn't a big deal. I knew that. Take this. I took out a folded sheet of paper. Kim Yong-woo unfolded the paper and frowned as he looked at it. Is this a picture of a poo? You saw it well. It really is poo. Surely this isn't a work of art? If people really line up for art like this, I don't understand that field. It is not a piece of art. It wasn't a piece of art but something I drew. Admiration crossed Kim Yong-woo's face. He had wondered if his master had different taste. Kim Yong-woo asked him. Then what is it? A safe zone where creatures can't enter. Isn't it fascinating? Yes? Kim Yong-woo blinked his eyes. He wasn't sure how to respond. It was the first time he heard of something called the safety zone. It wasn't easy to lightly accept it. I gave it to him and said, "There are structures like these on the 3rd floor of the dungeon. Creatures can't invade these structures." Wait a minute, the 3rd floor? Kim Yong-woo couldn't understand it. With the strength I demonstrated, it was simple enough to climb to the 3rd floor. Nevertheless, the surprise reaction meant he still underestimated my strength. I clicked my tongue. "Why are you so surprised? Then you found the path to the 3rd floor? You fought the orcs? It wasn't that complicated, huh? Really wonderful. Can you tell me the path? I wouldn't bring it up if I wasn't going to tell you." "Ah." Kim Yong-woo clapped his hands. He inwardly calculated while smiling. Once they climbed up to the 3rd floor, the safety zone meant they could easily seize the treasure. He couldn't even imagine the benefits that could be obtained. He had to seize the opportunity. Occupy it. Then you will be able to take a lot of benefits. Of course. There will be a commotion. Dungeons had something like a safety zone. There weren't many places where they could relax without the threat of creatures. The influence of the guild will likely be reorganized again. If they occupied the area, then the Heavens Will Guild would be able to keep their position. It wasn't impossible for them to jump one step further. "I will depart after 1 week. Take Yoon Hai with you. You can pick the remaining 10 people." I told him the strategy to attack the 2nd floor. The elites would be organized, including Yoon Hai. Yoon Hai was in her growth phase. I wanted her to experience various situations. "I understand, but the form of the structure is a little strange." I stayed calm. Yi was behind the design of the structure. I really couldn't understand Yi's senses. One day I might understand it. There was no law that we needed to have similar tastes. Kim Yong-woo admired the picture on the paper, no matter what it looks like, and sighed with eager eyes. 1 week later, a raid with 12 people was prepared, including Yoon Hai. The personnel were similar to when we captured the 1st floor, and the 2nd floor was cleared in 5 days. Gold, treasures, rare items, magic tools, and the presence of the safety zones meant there was once again a huge uproar among the awakened. The 4 guilds, including the Mithril Guild, succeeded on the 4th floor, but it was buried by the achievements of the Heavens Will Guild. Safety zone. A place where the creatures couldn't invade. A place like that was special for the awakened who risked their lives every time they entered the dungeon. At least it meant they were a place where they could relax. A place of absolute rest in the dungeon. It would lift some of the heavy burden. The belief that something could change centered on the safety zone. The guilds immediately started on aggressive strategies. The location of the safety zones could be determined through various video media. But that was it. The best guild in Korea was still the Heavens Will Guild. The news also drew in more awakened from overseas. I instantly recovered the lost points and reached 1.5 million points in just 2 months. I was probably the only demon with that much points. The dukes and grand dukes. At best, they would have half the amount? My confidence soared into the sky at the amount of points. This would be a huge deal once I used them. There was no need to be cheap with my points. I had a purpose. And exactly 1 year after I returned. That evening, a blue message window flashed in the air. After 30 minutes, you will be transferred to the Demon World auction. You can be accompanied by 1 creature. I smirked. Finally, the Demon World auction I had been waiting for arrived. Demon World auction. The auction was hosted in the name of the devil. If they were lucky and had the required points, then rare items, creatures or skills could be purchased. It was called a festival of points. The Demon World auction sold exactly 100 items in 1 day. Among the 100 objects, some of them were useless, but most of them had a quality rating. Of course, there was a set amount of points for the lowest bid. A few years before I returned, the lowest bid at the auction house for the 5LV high-class creature was 39 million points. The lowest bid for a dragon was 15 million points. The amount of points for a Balrog was so ridiculous that it wasn't sold. 1 duke took 5 years to gather the points required to purchase a dragon. At any rate, it was quite unbalanced. However, this was the first auction. My biggest chance. The Devil Death Bringer had created an unfriendly game. I was grateful for my previous life. The details of the Demon World auction were thoroughly kept a secret. The demons only knew about the existence of the Demon World auction when the summoning message appeared. Of course, the demons had collected points for the auction. But, I had gathered it. 1.5 million points. When looking at the past, it wasn't an enormous amount. But considering that it was only 1 year, 1.5 million points was a ridiculous amount. The first Demon World auction was likely to have very cheap prices. With a little luck, I could use this to my advantage. It wasn't impossible to be in the lead of the 72 demons. Desire filled my eyes. My anticipation and tension rose to the maximum. Once the dimensional portal opened, I was summoned into a wide room 200 pyongs large. I've arrived. It was a location outside the demon world. It was another world where dark spirits lived. This was the heart of that place. Instead of the devil, the barren land was governed by dark spirits. Hying. Inferno appeared next to me. The creature I chose to take with me was Inferno. I looked around. There was nothing in the room. There was only one large door at the entrance. The door was made with thick logs coarsely cut. Keek. Soon an elderly man with a curved back opened the door. Randolph Briggseel Nim? Are you a gnome? Kihihi. I am a corrupted gnome. It was customary to call the dark spirits corrupted. But other than the dark spirits, a few other elemental spirits lived here. I nodded. Right. Rather, are you Randolph Briggseel? That's right. Then follow me. I will direct you to the auction house. Before that, would I be able to see the auction items? I wanted to preview the auction goods. The only reason the auction was kept secret was to stimulate the demons. Dark spirits were thirsty for points obtained from the demons. Their aim was to raise the prices in order to obtain more points. It was similar to Yihi trying to become the Fairy King. That isn't difficult, Kihi. Do you have many points? Are you anxious because you want to buy things? A moderate amount. I understand. Let me guide you. The dark spirit started to guide me silently. I got on top of Inferno. The castle was wide beyond belief. It was enough as I moved while riding Inferno. The dark spirits had a fast speed. They had a spiritual body. Having no flesh meant it was natural for them to be quick. They could run to some extent. I could hear an uproar as I moved. How dare a dark spirit treat me like this? I am a marquis under Grand Duke Upa Nim. I don't know whether Grand Duke Upa has the right to the throne. I only listen to the king of the spirits. So why did you force summon me? I will directly meet the Spirit King. We better leave here safely. So, in the name of the devil. Don't carelessly use that name. Who? It can't be helped. The dark spirit blew up its body. It exuded a tremendous presence. A high-class dark spirit. Even demons would panic in front of it. That person? A marquis of the demon world. A close aide of the Grand Duke Upa was overwhelmed. He was similar to me in my past life. Just a different direction. Lost in hedonism, his dungeon was filled with succubus that subjugated the encountered awakened. They would then be killed off by the demon. I was impressed as I recalled it. I am lucky that my guest is cooperative. Kihihi. The dark spirit guiding me in the shape of a gnome laughed. You are high class? I am advanced. It is my dream to become high class. Kihihi. I checked using mind's eye and it was correct. Its abilities were lower than me but it couldn't be ignored. Perhaps a high-class spirit would be on a level similar to a duke. This was a place ruled by the dark spirits. They would be scary opponents for a marquis. A number of the high-class spirits were assigned as greeters. I continued to be interested in the spirits while moving. After a long trip, I arrived at some great doors that were 20 meters in height. The doors opened and inside were the 100 items put up for auction. There were creatures as well. The creatures were also some of the items. Tools to enhance the dungeons. Krasla, who I wanted, was among them, but others also gave off a solid impression. That woman, a demon, was looking around at the auction items. I was shocked as I saw her. Grand Duke Ariel, I couldn't forget, the name of the demon who won in my previous life. Her military power was enough to make her the strongest. I never thought I would encounter her in a place like this. I swallowed my saliva and used mind's eye. Name: Ariel Diablo. Occupation: Demon Grand Duke, Dungeon Master, Title * Devil's Descendant, Epic, Magic Power +10. * Weapon Master, XU, all stats +2. Stats: Strength 73, +2, Intelligence 74, +2. Agility 79, +2, Stamina 71, +2. Magic Power 75, +1 2. Potential. 372 plus 25 hundredths. Uniqueness. One of the 4 Grand Dukes. Governor of Underhell and Master of 18 Demons. Skill. Weapon Cheat, XU. Power of Words. U. Waterspout, Epic. Relative Comparison. Aerial Diablo. Strength 75, Intelligence 76, Agility 81, Stamina 73, Magic 87, Potential 372 plus 25 hundredths. Randolph Brigzeal. Strength 81, Intelligence 66, Agility 76, Stamina 82, Magic 90, Potential 379 plus 16 5 hundredths. Indeed, I had slightly higher stats. But this wouldn't have happened without the heart of the Hell Monarch and Yihi's blessing. Both of us had increased our abilities by more than 40. The Grand Duke Ariel had restored her power quickly. I had already reclaimed approximately 80% of my previous power. The rise of my stats was becoming smaller. But Ariel was different. She might not rest until filling up all of the 500 potential. On the other hand, I could catch up with Ariel and even become stronger than her in the future. Ariel didn't have memories of a previous life. The heart of the Hell Monarch also hadn't fully opened. Skill, it couldn't be helped. I was a physical type in the demon world. All the skills learned from my past life had disappeared. However, Ariel had a powerful skill in the demon world. A fearsome power that could separate the sky and land. Now the skill rating was likely to go up 1 or 2 steps. It seemed like she hadn't recovered all her power from the demon world yet. The skills also weren't the same. She hasn't learned Abyss Sword yet? I didn't see Ariel's patent skill, Abyss Sword. It was a fraudulent skill that returned everything it hid to 0, but I didn't see it in Ariel's status window. It means her stats are still insufficient to learn Abyss Sword. It made sense. Abyss Sword couldn't be used without all her stats restored. A very powerful skill was a double-edged sword. If she used it recklessly, then her hand would be ruined. Grand Duke Ariel was studying the weapons. She had a title of Weapon Master, so she could skillfully handle all weapons. If a good weapon was found, then she would want to buy it. I looked over Ariel once again. She had 2 long horns on her forehead that proved she was the devil's descendant, pointy elf-like ears, a beautiful visage and the atmosphere of an untouchable woman. Ariel Diablo. Herm? Ariel turned her head and looked at me. I glanced at her. This is the first time I've seen a demon like you. Who are you? I was currently wearing the half-skull mask. Of course, both of us had met. But even if I took off the skull mask, Ariel wouldn't remember me. She was a noble existence that wouldn't memorize the faces of each demon she met. I remembered how broken my body was after challenging Ariel. I had no choice but to give a bitter laugh. Randolph Brigzeal. Ariel's eyes changed, because I had opened up my magic power at the same time I said my name. However, it didn't work. The high magic that caused fear in the opponent was obsolete in her presence. That is a nice aroma of magic power. Are you under any Grand Dukes? She didn't remember despite telling her my name. I did not mind. In the final moments of my previous life, she said my survival instinct was like a bug. She didn't know my name even at the end. But the past was gone. I would force her to hear my name so much that she couldn't forget it. I would be a true enemy. Someone who could go shoulder to shoulder with the 4 Grand Dukes. No one can be above me. My goal was the devil. I wouldn't allow the Grand Dukes to take my place. An interested expression flashed on Ariel's face. You have skills or you are just speaking thoughtlessly. Either way, it isn't a wise move. Just because it isn't wise doesn't mean I won't get an unconditional victory. Sometimes strength and stubbornness could bring about victory. In fact, Ariel had been the final winner in my previous life. Ariel launched assault after assault on Grand Duke Upa. Not one bit of wisdom was involved. Yet she was talking about wisdom. I couldn't help finding it funny. I knew it. Ariel laughed. That's right. A fight between warriors starts with hitting the body. Strategies using the head isn't necessary. The one who becomes the devil won't be stupid. Then she erased the smile and looked straight at me. Attendant. If you don't serve another demon, then serve me. Your thoughts are similar to mine. It was at that moment. Power of words, you, has been used. Mind's eye, you, has successfully detected it. The detection method is successful and the control of power of words has lowered. Defended against 50%. Intelligence calibration 66. Defended against 85%. Your magic power is higher than the caster. The 20% calibration effect means 102% has been defended against. You are completely beyond the control of power of words. Ariel Diablo activated her skill, power of words. But I completely neutralized it. My stats were slightly superior. Mind's Eye meant I could detect the unexpected effect of power of words, and my superior magic power meant I wasn't affected. But it was dicey. If my intelligence hadn't risen due to Heart of the Hell Monarch, then I might be under the control of power of words. I can't be lacking intelligence. There was a high relationship between intelligence and resistance. No matter how high my magic power, if intelligence was low, then I would be weak to abnormal states. But both intelligence and magic power combined was higher, so I could be free from the influence. I coldly looked at Ariel and said, "I reject, haha." And Ariel gave a big laugh before saying, "A knockdown. I thought you were just a cold guy, but now I see that you truly have skills. Defending against my power of words. I should cut off your head now." She meant it. It was no accident that normally a Grand Duke occupied the throne. They all had their own view of the world that they moved in. They would immediately kill those outside this framework. Ariel had stepped on all the other demons and Grand Dukes to reach the throne. "Leave unless you think you can fight me." This wasn't the demon world. A world ruled by the king of the dark spirits. Those with power were bound to have a rough relationship with him. However, even the Grand Dukes had common sense. I lightly provoked her, but Ariel just looked like she had found a cute toy. Hoo-hoo, Randolph Brigzeal. Today I will step aside. This is indeed an interesting place. I won't cause a dispute today. Ariel turned around and left. I had a moment of hesitation. This was the first time Grand Duke Ariel had called my name. She always said I was like a bug and barely remembered me. My name was never said by her. The past and the future is different. By my hands. I gripped my fists tightly. More than anything, I once again thought that my direction was right. Kihihi. Incredibly scary. That is the famous Grand Duke Ariel Diablo. The dark spirit released its breath. Ariel Diablo. She was quite famous here for her overwhelming ability. Even the advanced spirits would feel the pressure. I slowed by pounding heart and said, "Do you have something to increase the rating of a skill? Do you mean the Sage's Leap?" "Yes." "Kihihi. You have good senses. A great item. Then please come this way." I seemed to be lucky. It was comfortable when thinking about it. I need to get my hands on it. An item known as Sage's Leap sometimes appeared in the Demon World auction. Its efficacy was worth millions of points, and there was always a heated competition every time it appeared. However, I didn't need to bother with the competition. I was a demon with 1.5 million points. Demons barely had 1 million, let alone 1.5 million. The dark spirit stopped and pointed towards a small bottle of water. "This is it. Be careful of your hands. There is an enchantment around it. If you touch it, then your hand will be destroyed." I knew that. There was an invisible enchantment covering the goods. But I could feel a strong repulsion when my hand got close to it. A warning not to touch the goods. It was an outstanding defense that even advanced creatures couldn't touch. An advanced creature would be evaporated on the spot. I never thought about touching it directly. I opened up Mind's Eye. Name: Sage's Leap. Description: Alchemy can increase the rating of all skills below Unique, U. If used on a Unique, U, skill, it will increase half a step towards Exceptional Unique, XU. There will be no effect on higher ratings. That's right. I nodded and said, "I will buy it immediately." Kihihi. Guessed Nim. I'm not sure if you know, but most demons only have an average of 130,000 points. The price to purchase it immediately is fixed. If you want to purchase the Sage's Leap immediately, then you need 520,000 points. Wouldn't you rather get it much cheaper at the auction? 130,000 points. It was lower than I thought. It was fortunate that I had 1.5 million points. I guess I don't have competition. Only average. A few demons might have more than that. But my points were more than 10 times the average. 520,000 points was a burden, but I had expected it. I need to purchase the Sage's Leap. There was a need to buy it immediately. There were many things at the auction that I might not be able to purchase until the end. I wanted to raise the rating of Mind's Eye. There were many unresolved functions with Mind's Eye. I realized the additional effects thanks to Ariel's power of words. It saw through power of words, so if the rating of mind's eyes increased, wouldn't it be able to detect and see through sealed items? A few sealed items always appeared in the auction. Some demons bought sealed items for an expensive price only to be dissatisfied. In my previous life, Duke Pella who used mind's eye couldn't detect the rating of sealed goods. Wasn't it because the rating of mind's eye was too low? Sage's Leap wasn't something that could be purchased simply with a lot of points. The Grand Dukes and Dukes had all controlled it in my previous life. The Grand Dukes would hand over Sage's Leap to certain demons, but Duke Pella had never earned it to increase mind's eye. Of course, I was excluded from the prizes. It was very difficult to raise the rating of skills obtained in the demon world. Mind's eye had been stuck at a unique rating. It is worth experimenting with. At the very least, upgrading mind's eye would increase intelligence. I wouldn't be as vulnerable to other states. I could prepare a wider range of moves. My abilities might even surpass Grand Duke Ariel. So I didn't think the damage would be too large. I will buy it immediately. Kihihi. Purchasing it immediately, I hate to say it twice. The dark spirit looked at me for a moment. The eyes expressed that it couldn't believe it, but then its expression turned serious. Wait a moment. The dark spirit left the warehouse. After 5 minutes, the dark spirit returned and was accompanied by a representative of the auction. The auction manager was sweating. It was in the form of a corrupted fat man. The owner of a 150 kilograms belly fat came out. No matter if it was a spiritual body, it still seemed exhausted. Pant, you want to buy Sage's Leap at once? I frowned at the dark spirit. I hated saying the same thing many times. I started to feel irritated. Kihihi. That's right. This guest wanted to purchase the Sage's Leap immediately. The dark spirit that guided me saw my eyes and answered on my behalf. Then please look at this. The auction representative held out a sheet of paper with a contract written on it. I thoroughly examined the paper and sensed dozens of magic spells contained in it. I placed my right hand on the paper without any delay. Sage's Leap has been purchased. 520,000 PT will be consumed. You have 1,032,447 PT remaining. Soon a blue light emerged from the paper. The light flowed towards the location of the Sage's Leap. The enchantment around the Sage's Leap gradually weakened and disappeared. The auction manager stuttered with incredulity. The deal has been completed. Congratulations. I ignored his words and grasped the Sage's Leap. After pulling out the cork, gulp, I drank it all at once. The Sage's Leap has been consumed. Please select a skill to raise the rating. Skill combination, R2. Mind's Eye, U. I only had 2 skills. There was no place for skill combination right now. I raised my hand into the air and chose number 2. Mind's Eye, U, has been raised to Mind's Eye, XU. No more message windows popped up after that. Finished? It was the first time I was taking Sage's Leap. I had to check the status window. It is over. I nodded my head. I confirmed the rating of Mind's Eye had increased. What was different? Was there anything different? I was about to use Mind's Eye to scan the goods when the dark spirit interrupted. Guest Nim. Now it is time to enter the auction house. In fact, time is a bit tight right now. I understand. There was no hurry. I would be able to see any changes while the auction was in progress. I slowly followed the dark spirit out of the warehouse. The place was reminiscent of a large opera house. There were grandstands filled with hundreds of seats separated into 2 levels on 4 sides of the hall, 6 chandeliers decorated with various jewels, hundreds of lights made by magic, singing boys and dancing girls. It combined to create a classical atmosphere. The auction would take place here. Now the auction was waiting for the last guests to arrive before starting. Upon passing through the huge door, I looked around to my left and right. My eyes noticed 4 seats located on the 2nd floor of the hall. Each Grand Duke and their people were sitting on different sides of the hall. They looked at me for a moment before turning away. Only Ariel looked at me with strange eyes for a little while longer. I felt like laughing. In other words, it meant I was sitting alone in the center of the seats. I wasn't a demon follower of any of the 4 Grand Dukes. That position was snatched by power. Originally, the demon with the name of Brigzeal was a follower of a Grand Duke. I wasn't sure if the devil had planned to invite the original Brigzeal. Whether it was accidental or authorized, I was the demon that ended up being invited. Either way, This situation is fun. There was a similar situation in my past life. However, I was in an exceptional condition compared to my past life. There was no point in any ass kissing at the auction. I would buy the things I wanted to buy. In order to buy it, I wouldn't care about the competition. I will eat up everything. Acting freely? In my past life, this seat would be filled with thorns. The Grand Dukes looked at me with cold and contempt-filled eyes. Malicious jeers and boos. I could hear things like, bug. I would look forward to destroying those cold gazes in the future. Grand Duke Ariel, Upa, Pandemonium and Okulos, in addition, they have good expressions on their faces. I sat down in the center of the grandstand along with my creature. I crossed my legs and looked around with an easy, disinterested expression. Unfortunately, this auction was a stage for me. I would be the focus of a single play. They wouldn't even be the supporting roles. Those who thought of themselves as protagonists would be surprised once it started. They would ask, "Who is he?" Of course, it would only end with questions. I wasn't going to announce that I was from South Korea. It wasn't time yet. I needed to reserve a little more power. And I couldn't allow the 4 Grand Dukes to even guess my location. In order to find out, the 4 Grand Dukes would have to share information about the locations of their demons' dungeons, and that was an impossible task. The Grand Dukes are competing. Cooperation won't work. The demon owners of each individual dungeon was confidential information. The relationship between the 4 Grand Dukes wasn't good, so the information wouldn't be released. But I knew. The dungeon positions of the Dukes and Grand Dukes was firmly grasped. This could be a very powerful tool if used correctly. Information was power, and there were means available to cut off their limbs. However, cutting off their limbs would be for later. Right now I needed to concentrate on the auction. After a few moments, lights started to gather on the stage. Soon a man in clown makeup appeared from backstage. Guest Nim, thank you for waiting. My name is Dubalong and I am responsible for the auction today. A face that was only seen once a year. Dubalong, one of the high-class spirits that was a close aide to the king. A level-headed person with the ability to embellish and make people laugh. He was the eyes and hands of the king of the spirits. All things related to the king flowed through him. It would be good if I could improve my relationship with the Spirit King. The Demon World auction is only held once a year, so this opportunity needs to be seized. The spirits, they could communicate with each other even if they were in different worlds. If I could communicate with Dubalong, then I could know the items for next year's auction in advance. This was a trick that Grand Duke Upa had used for decades. Upa, who became close to the Spirit King, could obtain goods before the auction. There was some type of deal like, I will spend more points at the auction. The dark spirits wouldn't just obtain points through the auction. And there was no law stating I couldn't take that position. It was necessary to make them sure that I was the best among the demons gathered here. Dubalong's eyes looked over all the demons, and paused for a moment as he came to me. His eyes were different from when he saw the other demons. He seemed interested in me for a reason. I was a demon who had already spent 520,000 points before the auction started. I made eye contact and smiled lightly. Well, sitting alone on the grandstand might have also played a part. Soon Dubalong confirmed the faces of all the demons and said, "Today you heard a rough explanation regarding the summoning, but I will formally say it again. This is a place where points can be used to buy goods, the world's largest auction brought to you by the Devil Deathbringer. A festival held once a year for you to get your heart's desire. Now, let's introduce the first auction product." At the same time, nearly a dozen dark spirits emerged from the right side of the stage. They were moving a huge, wheeled cage with a very familiar existence inside it. Dubalong spoke in a cold tone. We had a lot of worries. What would be best to start the auction? There are 100 products, but what is the most outstanding example? So we have prepared this. The legendary true demonic dragon, Aogen, written in legends, Krasla, who is half dragon and half elf. The half-elf Krasla, trapped behind the bars, growled like a wounded beast. A two-legged tribe of creatures with an intelligence that matched the demons. Humans were the prey of creatures, but the demons viewed the elves in the same way. I thought about it. I will make it different. Krasla looked just like he did in my previous life. I opened mind's eye and took a deep look. Name: Krasla. Occupation: demonic lancer. Title: *person with dragon's blood. R. Strength +4. Stats: Strength 74, plus 3, Intelligence 69, Agility 65, Stamina 72, Magic Power 77, Potential 357 plus 4 437. Uniqueness: a slave inscription is carved on the body. Skill: Dragon Stampede, U, Demon Sprint, R. I inwardly nodded. He had higher potential than Yu Hai and also had unique skills. Even his stats were shameful. There was someone right behind Krasla. She seemed to be a relative, but I didn't remember her face. Dubalong explained. And this is his younger sister, Chrisley, who is at the end of her life. This is a perfect situation of 1+1, so the winner will get both with no conditions. Although an elixir can help her recover, it isn't recommended. All the pathways in the body are blocked, so she is unlikely to grow even if she recovers. However, her face is smooth and you can use her for any purpose. Dubalong laughed politely as he explained the rest. Now, the auction will start with 0 points. I assure you that Krasla isn't an easy opponent for any demon to deal with. I'm not disparaging the abilities of my guests. He is someone with the blood of a true demonic dragon mixed in. If you want him, then speak without any hesitation. If you miss out on this, then the boys and girls on the ceiling will laugh. One of the Grand Dukes raised their hands. 10,000. Grand Duke Ariel Nim, 10,000 points have come out. And another Grand Duke raised their hands. 20,000. Grand Duke Upa Nim, it is going up fast. 50,000. Grand Duke Pandemonium Nim, 50,000 points have come out. Any more? Everyone became a little hesitant. 50,000 points was a lot for some demons. Even the Grand Dukes couldn't afford those points. It was because they didn't know what else would emerge in the auction. There were still plenty more auction products. Krasla was great, but they couldn't invest all their points in him. 100,000. Now all the Grand Dukes are participating. Grand Duke Okulo's Nim has called 100,000 points. 100,000. This was indeed a large sum. Grand Duke Okulos smiled leisurely. It was filled with derision about not investing in this treasure. Anger appeared on the faces of the 3 other Grand Dukes. As the only guest in the central grandstand, I raised my hand. 200,000. The whole area became silent. Even the boys and girls on the ceiling didn't laugh. Such an amount of points was trifling to me. 200,000. Earl Randolph Brigzeal Nim has called 200,000 points. The overwhelmed Dubalong called out my full name. The shock couldn't be avoided. Someone called out 200,000 at the very beginning. No, it was actually a cheap price to purchase Krasla and his sister Chrisley. It was like a gift. But the demons gathered here thought differently. I smirked. Yes, become curious. Continue being curious and remember me clearly. Randolph Brigzeal. I would make sure they remembered my name. 200,000 points have come out. Any more? If no one makes another offer, then Krasla will be sold to Randolph Nim. The demons' expressions changed after Dubalong's words. At the same time, they started to formulate strategies. I wasn't the only demon with 200,000 points. Each faction had a few. But they were important. There were many excellent things, so they couldn't compete for Krasla. Even though the devil created the points system, it wasn't a fair exchange. In short, exchanging or stealing points was considered illegal and would be subjected to a penalty. Both sides would have their points decreased by 20% for several years, so it was a severe penalty. In the end, all the factions could only come to one conclusion. The auction was just getting started. There would be better items than Krasla. This was clearly just the start. Dubalong wouldn't debut the most outstanding product in the beginning. They would hold onto the points to hopefully obtain rare items or skills. Be calm. When looking at it from an objective viewpoint, their choice was right. The demons with many points would have an advantageous position in the auction. I need to be calm, but I barely prevented my mouth from twisting into a smile. The spirits and demons had no idea. The true value wasn't Krasla but Chrisley. I became happy the moment I used Mind's Eye. I inwardly let loose a huge laugh. They were deceived by her sickly appearance and didn't realize her true value. It was natural. I only knew about it because Mind's Eye allowed me to see the status window. If it wasn't for Mind's Eye, then I wouldn't have noticed Chrisley's value. She wasn't a prominent person in my previous life before I died. Krasla had a reason to hate humans. I felt like I had picked up an item with the epic rating. I came here for Krasla, but my real achievement was his sister Chrisley. I am the only one who knows the value of the treasure. Chrisley was the greatest treasure. I could see her potential through the dust. This probably hadn't happened in my previous life. My heart pounded at the thought of what she would become under my hands. I once again used Mind's Eye to confirm Chrisley's status window. Name: Chrisley. Occupation: None. Title: * person with the blood of a true demonic dragon. Epic: Intelligence +6, Magic Power +6. Stats: Strength 19, Intelligence 94, +6. Agility 21, Stamina 10, -9. Magic Power 28, +6. Potential: 172 +3, 478. Uniqueness: born as the successor of the true demonic dragon's enormous strength. However, the 9 severed yin vein she was born with has given her the curse of the ice dragon. Skill: none. Crazy. This was the only word that could describe her potential and intelligence. Krasla and Chrisley both had titles regarding the blood of a dragon. But the rating was different. Chrisley was the real thing. In particular, her intelligence had reached beyond the transcendental wall, as it reached 100. 100, an astounding figure. Pure abilities were hard to raise between 80 to 100. But after it reached 90, raising it was like reaching for the stars in the sky. That's why I needed titles and items. Furthermore, the scale required for the stats to go up by 1 after reaching 90 was different every time. The title meant she reached 100, but even her pure ability was 94. Realistically, it didn't make sense. What this meant: she was immune to all different states. If she had an epic skill and magic power was also over 100, then she could be called invincible. Anything else? Intelligence also affected magic casting speed, the force of the skill, and it had a close relationship with skill level. Higher rated skills required a strong body to use, but high intelligence could offset some of the penalty. In addition, the speed of raising the skill level would increase. Even if learning normal rated skills, a person with 100 intelligence meant the rating might increase to unique. Intelligence was an all-round stat. However, it was hard for intelligence to reach that high unless they were born with it, had a special bloodline, or the help of items like the Heart of the Hell Monarch. Chrisley met 2 of the 3 requirements. Therefore, she managed to have 100 intelligence. The problem is stamina. 1 stamina. The ice dragon's curse was to blame for the -9. It caused her to be near death. Even breathing would be painful, and she was barely hanging on with her robust spirit. She had a pale complexion and could barely stand up by herself. Jack JJAK. Dubalong clapped after waiting 30 seconds. Nobody raised their hands. The final bid was determined. Krasla has been sold to Randolph Nim for 200,000 points. Congratulations. The item will be automatically moved to your dungeon at the end of the auction. I smiled. Originally Krasla should have gone to Grand Duke Upa. Perhaps he would have offered a little more than Okuyo's 100,000 points, but my bid of 200,000 was too high. I've overcome the biggest hurdle. My mind felt more at ease. The dark spirits removed Krasla's cage and brought something else. What now? I relaxed and paid attention to Dubalong. The following auction item is the Shiny Gauntlet. It is strongly recommended for those who prefer melee combat. The intense glare will blind your opponent. Its firmness is beyond belief, and the right user can bring out its power. It can be compared to the auction item previously introduced. Starting at 10,000 points, Dubalong was introducing the Shiny Gauntlet that appeared to be at least a unique item. But I couldn't help inwardly laughing at the result of Mind's Eye. Name: Shiny Gauntlet, Rare. Description: a shiny gauntlet that has been polished tens of thousands of times. It is very hard. A scam. A skillful seller. And scammer. That was my assessment of Dubalong. The Shiny Gauntlet shone beautifully like its name. The description explained that its hardness was its best strength. It would create a synergy with very hard armor. Dubalong said. He compared it to the item just introduced at the auction. There was no way it could compare to Krasla and Chrisley. I was sure of it after seeing the name. Despite being lacking, it was likely to get a high price at the auction. The auction meant they were likely to think, that is a nice item, and would bid. Emotion was bound to be involved when looking at an item or skill. A rare skill book would cost 50,000 points. If sentiment was involved, A scroll worth only 20,000 points might be bought for 50,000 points. I kept my mouth closed as others drooled over it. 3 of the Grand Dukes were made to desire it. Dubalong also knew this fact. He couldn't act if he didn't know. He calmly and subtly arranged things. He used his tongue naturally. 10,000. It has started with Grand Duke Ariel Nim, 10,000 points. 20,000. He truly doesn't rest. Earl Randolph Briggseel Nim, 20,000 points have come out. I shrugged. I am willing to do this. I played along now that I realized Dubalong's intentions. This way I could ensure that the opponent consumed more of their points. 30,000. Grand Duke Upa Nim. Now, any more? If there isn't, then it will be the winning bid. 40,000. Once again, a bid by Earl Randolph Nim. A truly discerning eye. Excellent. He truly had a good lip service. 50,000. It can't be. Grand Duke Upa Nim. 50,000 points has come out. Grand Duke Upa's voice was mixed with irritation. None of the others gave any more bids, so Grand Duke Upa bought a miscellaneous item for 50,000 points. It has been sold for 50,000 points. Congratulations. It will be sent to your dungeon shortly after the auction ends. I laughed lightly. Japtem was Japtem. The shiny gauntlet was Japtem. Yet it was bought for 50,000 points. It was natural for laughter to emerge. Results like this could also occur at the auction. Demons bought items at an overpriced value. At this point, Dubalong seemed to notice my intentions. Dubalong's eyes stared at me. He seemed to view me different from the other demons. I had succeeded in carving my name into his mind. Several more auctions passed until the 10th auction item made an appearance. This auction is a little special. A sealed dagger. We don't know what item might emerge once the seal is loosened. It is like a lottery, but this is a great opportunity to obtain an epic rating. Starting at 50,000 points. One of the things that I wanted came out. I opened mind's eye the moment I saw the gleaming dagger. Sealed weapon. The seal has a very high rating, so using mind's eye will give a penalty. Penalty. I had to experience it once in a while. Besides, I could read the rating and description of the sealed item. My gamble was half successful. I needed to receive the penalty to confirm the other half. I ignored the warning and used mind's eye. Name Howling Dagger, XR. Description. A dagger with the strong poison of a banshee. It will eat away at the spirit. Asterisk, it is possible to use the rare grade skill, Acceleration, 3 times a day. A penalty will be given for the very high seal. Strength -10 for 72 hours. Biddle. I felt a sudden weakness as my body staggered. This is the penalty? The message window stated that my strength would be degraded for 3 days. This is enough. At least it didn't permanently decrease. I didn't bother bidding and the weapon was bought for 50,000 points. Grand Duke Ariel had the first and last bid because the other Grand Dukes didn't participate. They hated to gamble. The starting bid was too expensive. A sealed weapon came out again at the 15th auction. I took a deep breath and used mind's eye. Name Blunt Sword, N. Description. A sword that has lost its capability as a weapon. A penalty will be given for the very high seal. Health -10 for 72 hours. Hoo-hup. I managed to withstand the sense of anemia. It was a lot of pain just to confirm a junk item. I am going to find something. Obviously, before I returned to the past. An epic grade equipment had been found twice after being unsealed. There were some never disclosed to the public, so it might actually be 3 or 4. The odds were low, but it wasn't impossible to get an epic item at the auction. The 21st auction. A sword once appeared again. I once again opened mind's eye while remaining silent. Name Wrath, Epic, set item. Description. The last piece made by the mythical blacksmith Oswin that even the gods opposed. Characterized by the 7 deadly sins, the evil contained in it was so powerful that Oswin reportedly went crazy. Wrath, such pure evil. Asterisk strength +7, the epic grade skill, Wrath, is available once every 7 days. A 7 sins set item has been found. Collecting the same type of set items will increase the effect. A penalty will be given for the very high seal. Agility -10 for 72 hours. It came out. I ignored the awful feeling of helplessness. My gamble was a complete success. Epic rating. And part of a set? If set items were collected, then a more powerful force would be exerted. Once all 7 items were gathered, an absolute power could be unleashed. Normal, rare, unique, epic and legend was a chain with legend at the peak. Even in my past life, I only heard of 2 items with a legend rating. It would be difficult to find a higher rated skill or item. Those labeled with a set were even more rare. An epic set? It was in the realm of dreams. If all the set items were collected, then it would have a value 2 steps above its rating. If I could obtain all of the 7 sins, then I wouldn't need to worry about equipment anymore. My weak body trembled. Krasla and Chrisley were unpolished gems. It would take time to smooth them out. But Wrath was already completed and had the potential to be completed. Furthermore, I could use it to enhance my own strength. Increasing my own strength gave me greater joy than that of my colleagues or creatures. It can't be helped since I have the soul of a warrior. A warrior proved their worth through fighting. It was natural to have a strong attachment to weapons. My eyes deepened as I looked at Wrath. Quite a lot of points have been exhausted. Now they should have 200,000 points at most. During the previous 21 auctions, I had stuck to my role as random bidder. Sometimes I was successful in making a purchase, and including Krasla and Chrisley, I spent 257,000 points. The Dark Spirit said that the demons had an average of 130,000 points. Except for my 1.5 million points, there was a total of 7.86 million points. When subtracting the 2.57 million spent at the auction, the 71 demons had a total of 5.29 million points left. It would be an average of 75,000 points. On the other hand, I still had 830,000 points. I turned and looked at the sides of the hall. So far, only 2 demons had used 200,000 points at the auction. There were still 2 factions with more points. They weren't competition, but I needed to watch their dynamics carefully. This is a sealed weapon. An unusual scent of magic can be felt from it. Let's start at 50,000 points. Dubalong introduced with confidence. I immediately raised a hand. I knew the value of Wrath. 50,000. Earl Randolph Nim. 50,000 points have come out. Any more? 60,000. Grand Duke Ariel Nim. She still has points remaining. Ariel participated. She had bought a single sealed weapon before. It was a fairly decent weapon with the rating of exceptional rare, XR. She didn't have much points remaining but saw a significant sealed item. This isn't a pure discerning eye. Ariel Diablo is a weapon master. She might be able to identify a little bit of the sealed weapon. It wasn't surprising. 70,000. Grand Duke Upa Nim. It has come to 70,000. Steeply rising. Other than Grand Duke Ariel, the Grand Duke Upa also participated. I wanted to relax, but they insisted on a competition. Of course, those 2 were busy staring at each other, but I couldn't give up an epic set item. 100,000. Earl Randolph Nim. He doesn't care about looking nice. 100,000 points have come out. 110,000. Grand Duke Ariel Nim. 120,000. Grand Duke Upa Nim. 150,000. Where is his limit? Earl Randolph Nim. Grand Duke Ariel and Upa finally realized and turned towards me. Of course, there wasn't anything good in their gazes. But Ariel was already at her limit. Earlier she had used 50,000 points, so she didn't have much remaining. Upa was also in a similar situation. I could afford it. They became certain of that. 3, 2, 1. Congratulations. It has been sold to Randolph Nim. Dubalong clapped loudly. Wrath had become mine. I was also able to buy an additional 6 items at the auction. The unique rated skill, Lightning God Technique. The unique grade ring, Paranormal, an agility potion, an exceptional unique set item. Death Wand. A rare grade, Flower of Eternity, and a whole village of dark elves was bought for a total of 650,000 points. The list of items obtained. Name Lightning God Technique, U. Description. A recipe from someone studying lightning. Lightning can be freely handled up to a 12-star cultivation. Name Paranormal, U. Description. A ring that randomly gives one of 5 different blessings. All stats +2 for 1 hour, recovery, magic power +5 for 30 minutes, grant a powerful attraction and infinite energy. One of these blessings can be given once a day. Name Agility Potion. Description. Agility has permanently increased by 1. Name. Death Wand, XU, set. Description. A wand used by the King of Death. His achievements in the art of death is tainted with fear. Asterisk magic power +4, bound item, undead creation, skill is available. Name flower of eternity, R. Description. A beautiful flower that doesn't need to be watered and will bloom forever. It has an effect of making the surroundings beautiful. The village of dark elves couldn't be described in detail, but it was a small place with 50 people. However, the mature dark elves could display a combat force equal to LV3 mid-grade creatures. They could be purchased separately, but I couldn't miss the chance to obtain them for a much cheaper price. Lightning God Technique, Paranormal and Agility Potion were things that I could use. In particular, potions that permanently increased stats were incredibly expensive. I would drink it later when I was blocked by a wall. The Death Wand had a wonderful synergy with the Command Magic book I discovered the other day. The Death Apostle and Command Magician professions had a synergy effect, so I planned to transfer them to Chrisley. The combination of her intelligence and potential gave me high expectations for the creation of an unprecedented necromancer. If she grew a little more, then I could entrust her to act as the proxy of the Dungeon Master. A Dungeon Master had to deal with death. The setup of a perfect substitute. Flower of Eternity. I purchased it for 3,000 points and would naturally give it to Yihi. I should give her something like a flower. It was the first time I bought a gift, so it was fun imagining Yihi's reaction. This isn't the end. I used a lot of points at the auction. However, I acquired something after using the points. Even I didn't anticipate that an Easter egg would appear again. A remarkable achievement. More than 1 million points have been used in the first auction. 7th grade Easter egg will open. 1 extra stat has been acquired. You can raise the desired stat at any time. Ha ha ha. After the auction ended, I exited with a big smile. The results were better than expected, so I was satisfied. The 7th grade reward fell short of the 3rd grade Heart of the Hell Monarch, but the compensation wasn't bad. I could raise any stat I wanted by 1 point at any time. It would be useful since raising a stat above 90 was hard. Things like the agility potion played a huge role at that time. Stop. I had just left the huge hall where the auction took place. A marquis stood blocking me. A demon that filled his dungeon with succubus. I could guess that he was one of Grand Duke Upa's entourage. I suppose they thought it was unfair I took all the good items. No, maybe they were wondering how I managed to raise so much points. I walked forward while ignoring him. He was acting under the orders of a duke or grand duke. There was no need to worry. This lowlife is ignoring me? Suik. A spear flew towards me. He couldn't tolerate it anymore and attacked. But there was an overwhelming difference in abilities. Even if my abilities had declined, only a duke or grand duke could face me. I caught the flying spear. This attack? Ick. He tried to take back the spear. You, let go. You will regret it. Regret? You are the one that is going to regret it. Turn over the Death Wand. That item is wasted on a lowlife like you. If you pass it over, then I will be happy to let you leave. The reason for the fight was the Death Wand. Lowlife. I laughed bitterly. In the end, I was still called a bug. I had to hear that word even in this life. I maintained my hold on the spear and summoned the sword. I strongly pulled the spear and cut off the left arm. Kuik. It is too late to figure it out. It happened in an instant. His abilities fell far short of mine. The demon glared at me with cold eyes. In my eyes, you are the lowlife. Tread lightly or you will cease to exist. I smiled coldly and prepared to cut the remaining arm. It wouldn't be too late to kill him after returning to Earth. Killing a demon here would cause any long-term relationship with Dubalong to crumble. Paysack. Just as my sword was about to move, a black sphere passed by. The sphere was embedded in the ground and started to absorb the surrounding area. It was a skill I was familiar with, yet the sucking power wasn't as strong as I remembered. But once the skill was used at its maximum value, it wasn't strange for a building to fly away. A familiar skill. At the same time, an overwhelming presence could be felt everywhere. The parent showed up after the child is hurt. I shrugged while holding my sword. The Grand Duke Upa was the one restraining him. A black hole that sucked in everything around it was his patented skills. Standing next to Grand Duke Upa were many demons. To not lower your head after seeing me, I can't believe there is someone like this. I could tell his personality from his tone. Arrogant and self-righteous. A presence distinctly different from me. This demon under my feet? I don't remember how he got there. Upa's expression became stormy. How cheeky. But it is a fact that you attacked one of my demons. Shouldn't you explain this? He asked for an explanation of the attack. I spoke with annoyance as I roughly explained. He attacked me first. I don't see your arm cut off. Just stick it back on. It wasn't difficult. I had vaguely expected this situation. I expected it and acted moderately. In fact, if I was excited then the demon would already be dead. Kim Yong-woo spoke about an elephant and an ant. It was that type of difference. I was stronger from the beginning. Despite that, I only cut off an arm. Why? This wasn't the demon world. A place ruled by the king of the spirits. Be quiet or I will slash your neck. My neck? Haha. Cutting my neck. I was someone who survived and went back to the past. I wouldn't die in a place like this. This guy. If you don't act moderately then I won't forgive you. Pakin. Stop his mouth for me. Duke Pakin. One of the 3 dukes beside Grand Duke Upa. He nodded and went forward. The atmosphere swiftly became grim. I opened mind's eye. Name. Pakin Grioli. Occupation Demon Duke. Dungeon Master. Title * King of Wolves. XU. Agility and Strength +4. Stats. Strength 80, +4, Intelligence 63. Agility 65, +4, Stamina 68. Magic Power 77. Potential. 353 +8 500ths. Uniqueness. The Master of Grioli, the Barren Land of Wolves. Skill. Wolf. U. Regeneration. U. Relative comparison. Pakin Grioli. Strength 84, Intelligence 63, Agility 69, Stamina 68, Magic 77, Potential 353 +8 500ths. Randolph Brigzeal. Strength 71, Intelligence 56, Agility 66, Stamina 72, Magic 80, Potential 329 +16 500ths. All stats -10 due to a penalty. I shook my head. He was slightly better in terms of stats. The penalty was to blame. I looked at 5 sealed items at the auction with mind's eye, so my stats were -50. If I was in my normal state then I could beat him easily. The same was true for the skills. But I could use Lightning God technique and Wrath to reverse the situation. The difference between a Duke and Grand Duke is large. The vast majority of Grand Dukes had stats close to 400. Meanwhile, the Dukes were situated between 340 to 360. Indeed, a Grand Duke. They were completely different, and my growth was enough to put me shoulder to shoulder with a Grand Duke. It was true that I had a penalty, but I just shrugged it off. At this time, some demons emerged from the auction. Grand Dukes Ariel, Pandemonium and Okulos. They looked at the situation between Pakin and I with interested eyes. Of course, most of their interest was focused on me. I was the only one among the 72 demons who wasn't in a faction. A demon who generously used a huge amount of points. Was I strong or weak? They would contact me if I was strong or discard me if I was weak. I felt like turning and spitting at them. A cold type of calculation. Listen, fledgling demon. Pakin roared like a beast. King of the Wolves. Lord Grioli. A loyal warrior. But it was in vain. A foolish and stupid guy. The evaluation of Pakin Grioli passed through my head. You don't need a weapon? A dog demon? Spoiled bastard. This is my weapon, Pakin said as he showed off his sharp teeth and nails harder than steel. Is that so? Then let's go. I raised my sword, and the moment I dropped into an attack posture. Stop. This is the temple of the Spirit King. Nobody is allowed to run wild through it. A high-class spirit showed up. Dubalong was standing next to it and he winked at me. I was a VIP customer. In addition, I made his roll fun so he had some goodwill towards me. Just in time, I immediately put down my sword. I had no intention of fighting any longer. A spirit is barging in on these matters? He insulted Grand Duke Upa Nim. He deserves to be punished. Pakin had a fiery temper so he outright protested it. It was also the first time he stepped foot in the spirit world. He was a person who only followed Grand Duke Upa's words. I just laughed. Really stupid. He should have figured out how important the dark spirits who organized the auction were. Taking a step back would benefit each other. Grand Duke Upa also didn't stop Pakin. An annoyed expression was also on his face. They were forcefully summoned to participate in the auction. It felt like a provocation from the dark spirits, and now they were interfering. The accumulated anger had flowed over. Everyone makes mistakes at first. Pakan and Upa are making an irreversible mistake. I'm not sure of other places. However, this was an absolute place to the dark spirits. The temple of the Spirit King. How could the dark spirits ignore and walk away from such behavior? They were tying a rope around their necks. Based on the agreement between the spirits and the demons, the spirits were able to prevent certain demons from participating in the auction. Especially in the early days, those that couldn't participate in the auction would find themselves falling behind the other demons. Yet Upa and Pakan didn't know this yet. That's why they acted like this. Spirits? Grand Duke Upa might have power in the demon world, but this is the spirit world. This isn't the place to act wildly. The body of the high-class dark spirit trembled in anger. Several spirits gathered behind its back. Despite this, Pakan didn't care. Bah, so how are you going to stop us? We are demons. Spirits shouldn't interfere in the matters between demons. The other demons also thought like that. But the spirits had different thoughts. But this is the spirit world. You traveled here, so you need to follow our laws. You summoned me by force, but I have to follow your rules? Don't be so overconfident. The spirits organized this due to the will of the devil. Then fine, if you don't want it. Grand Duke Upa and his demons will be banned from the auction for 3 years. Okay, I wouldn't come even if I was allowed to. Pakan declared bitterly. The story ended with Pakan's declaration. Haha, 3 years. A masterpiece. Grand Duke Upa and his demons couldn't participate in the auction for 3 years. They wouldn't realize the gap that would occur until it was too late. One of them has dropped out. It was expected. He was a demon. Grand Duke Upa took the trap. A desirable outcome. I played the strings a little bit and it aligned perfectly. The spirits will deal with any fights that take place here. The dark spirit waved. Then Pakan growled out. Ridiculous. Who dares? I agree. Do you have any questions? I interrupted Pakan. I wanted to put an end to this now. At the same time, the face of the high-class spirit changed. Dubalong's face softened. Randolph Briggseel Nim, are you going to cooperate on this matter? There is no reason not to cooperate. This is your land. Thank you. Hoo-hoo. It is like the human saying. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Please note that Rome is the name of a country. Human beings are decent when it comes to respect. Earl Randolph Briggseel Nim, I am curious about the circumstances, but the tone was completely different from when it dealt with Pakan. Anyway, I was competing with the other demons. I didn't care about them. On the other hand, I would foster a good relationship with the spirits. We would shake hands from the beginning. The demon frowned as they looked at me. Grand Duke Upa and Pakan had hostile eyes. I didn't care. I didn't need them in my framework. I am going my own way. I didn't know what would happen in the future. But it was certain they would run rampant. However, I just walked away. The auction ended. I was able to return safely to the dungeon. Yi was sleeping on the dungeon core. It seems like she slept all day. A fairy originally liked to sleep a lot. She didn't have a physical flesh, so she could sleep for a couple of days. She didn't even notice the dungeon master had come back. I pulled out a small stone the size of a nail. The auction representative Dubalong, a close confidant of the Spirit King, had given me a gift. I can contact him with this. The stone was a tool that made communication possible. However, it wasn't a simple gift. Dubalong didn't say it openly, but I could guess what the gift meant. He will inform me of auction goods in advance. I could plan in advance if I knew the products. It was possible to get good items, skills and creatures. I could save time over the next few years thanks to Grand Duke Upa and Pakan. Gaining a harmonious relationship with the spirits through an antagonistic atmosphere. And I would continue with their tacit consent. It was a win-win situation. There was no reason to resist. Ying. At that time, a crack in space appeared on the right side. I turned my eyes away from the stone. Arrived. The first thing that made its appearance through the crack was wrath. Following that was the Death Wand, Paranormal, Flower of Eternity, Lightning God Technique and the Agility Potion. It was the transfer of the purchased items. Hup. What just happened? Yi suddenly woke up and blearily looked around. She didn't even think to wipe away the saliva at her mouth. I ignored Yi and placed all the items in my magic bag. Kying. Soon the crack became larger and 50 dark elves walked through. Most were young adults, but it was a reasonable price. One adult dark elf normally cost 6,600 point. But I bought 50 adults for only 80,000 points. I smiled as I saw the two people walking behind them. Krasla and Chrisley. I looked at them with an expectant expression. Chapter 33 to 37. Krasla and Chrisley. They are nervous. I could read the nerves in their facial expressions and gestures. In particular, Krasla was looking at me with tough eyes, but his body was trembling slightly. His eyes were filled with strength in an attempt to protect Chrisley. It was ludicrous to go against the dungeon master, but it was an instinctive behavior as a brother. Anyway, Krasla's actions weren't over the limit. He didn't show his teeth towards me. It is due to the slave's mark. The auction house had imprinted a seal on his body and soul. The moment he tried to oppose the dungeon master, his body would experience unbearable pain. Even Krasla couldn't relax knowing that. Greetings to the dungeon master. The 50 dark elves simultaneously kneeled. Are you the chief? I asked an adult who was in front of the dark elves. He was the only elderly, white-haired figure. The aging dark elf nodded. Yes, dungeon master. Your name? Julium. Is everybody from the same village? That's right. Although they were sold separately in the auction, Krasla and Chrisley are also from the same village. I touched my jaw. The dark spirits usually paid something in exchange for the auction items. It was how the spirits filled up their auction items. In some cases, they were caught by the corrupted, but anyway, it was very rare for an entire auction to pass through an auction. In addition, Krasla and Chrisley were sold separately at the auction. There must be something important about the village, or there were circumstances that made them contract with the dark spirits. I was silent for a while before Julium said, "The true vampire clan took an interest in Chrisley and there was no way to escape. Therefore we made a contract with the dark spirits. I didn't ask anything. Dungeon Master is someone who will lead all of us. It is natural to describe the situation. They gave me the explanation without even asking. The true vampire clan. I recalled the features of a vampire. They had hot blood. They consumed the yin of women in order to try and cool their blood. But they had targeted Chrisley. Is it because of the Ice Dragon's curse? Ice Dragon's curse. It was a powerful restraint that ran through the veins. Juliam's eyes widened. You know about it? The magic is so strong that it is impossible not to notice. A moderate cover. I easily figured things out due to mind's eye. There was no need to bring up distrust. That's right. Krasla has the blood of a true demonic dragon, but Chrisley has barely survived since she was born. Nevertheless, how could we hand her over to the vampires? They either didn't know or deliberately omitted it. The latter. Chrisley had the best blood of the true demonic dragon running through her. That part was purposely omitted. I got a strong impression of a desire to hide and protect her. I snorted. An entire village wouldn't enter a contract with the dark spirits just to escape some vampires. It was to ensure that Chrisley living inside the dark elf village would be protected from the vampires. It was omitted, but it wasn't in order to deceive me. Although it definitely wasn't true loyalty. It would be very challenging to swear allegiance to a person they didn't know. I wanted to make Krasla and the dark elves follow me deep in their bones. In order to do this, I needed to know where to place the line. Anyway, I hold the key. I recalled lightning god technique. Yu Hai had been blessed by the spirit of lightning and gained the ability to use lightning. If I used lightning god technique, then it might be possible to unblock the yin veins. I had 90 magic power, so it would be possible if I had the power of lightning. There was no law that the blocked veins couldn't be fixed. Time is a problem. I need to extend her life with the elixir. Chrisley's life force was exhausted, so it was a situation where she could die tomorrow. But I needed to use the time to learn lightning god technique. The thing that could buy that time was the elixir. It cost 100,000 PT and was an absolute remedy. I checked my points soon after returning from the auction house. I needed to take steps to buy the elixir. They must have signed the contract in order to obtain the elixir. They probably just used the vampires as a pretext to obtain the elixir. Chrisley was a significant presence to them, so they sold themselves to the dark spirits. The whole town had signed a contract just to protect Chrisley. Of course, this was just something I predicted. I wiped the thoughts from my head and said, "Do you want me to pity you?" No. It is just one of those things that happened. Julium shook his head. I smirked and said, then from now on, you will be members of my dungeon. Are you aware of what you should be doing? Stop the humans coming to invade the dungeon? There seemed to be some basic education. That's right. Right now, fearless human beings have started climbing up this dungeon. Then wait at a given location and prepare to defend that place. That place is, the 15th floor should be reasonable. You will consult with Yi and the dwarves. I've only set up the ecology up to the 5th floor, but placing the dark elves on the 6th floor would collapse the balance. The current awakened could only defeat low-grade creatures, so it was reasonable to place them on the 15th floor. Yi flew over and sat down on my shoulder. Then she laid both hands on her waist. Ahem, you hear that right? I am Yi. Listen carefully to my words. The fairy of the dungeon core. Julium lowered his body. Yi raised her nose even higher. Yi, you are assigned to the 15th floor. I have other work to do. Yes, Tilda. Yi flew in front of the dark elves. Then she said with a sinister expression on her face, follow me. Yi will be your guide. But if you don't come along properly, then I will leave you behind. Yi guided the dark elves. You guys, you should be well prepared. Yi isn't very nice. I won't pamper you. If you make a large fuss while working, then I will throw you to the orcs. We will keep that in mind. Julium and the rest answered mechanically. A good attitude. Yi continued with a smile. But hopefully the work will go well. I don't want Master to scold me. Compensation? Well, I should give you something. Tell me what you want. Saying that before working? Yi seemed to have widened her mindset. Julium spoke carefully. That, then, can we receive an elixir? What, elixir? That's pretty expensive, but I think that the Dungeon Master can buy it. Well, you're right. Dungeon Master is great. He can drink an elixir every day like it was water. He can even bathe in elixirs. Yi lied without even blinking. Julium stuttered with surprise. Tea truly great. I realized from the auction house. Compared to the attitudes of the Grand Dukes. But why do you want an elixir? An elixir is required in order to improve Chrysley's status. The one behind the large dark elf in the back? Yes. Her body has been very weak since she was born. The Ice Dragon's curse. The strong yin was a curse that meant she would die before 20 years passed. An elixir wouldn't cure it, but it would improve her state. Yi thought for a moment before smacking her lips together. I can't give you an elixir. Yi doesn't have permission for this. Do you know how hard it is to make 100,000 points? Points don't just emerge from the ground. Then the Dungeon Master has to approve it? This whole place is Master's dungeon. You guys are no different. You must make yourself useful to Master. If Master approves, then you can get the elixir. In contrast, if you make Master angry, then Yi doesn't know what will happen. Do you want something other than the elixir? No. The elixir is necessary. Then should Yi give some advice? You are very clever, so we will listen. Yi smiled with satisfaction. The kobolds and goblins were stupid, so the dark elves were quite good in the eyes of the fairy. Okay, listen carefully to Yi's words. First, Dungeon Master hates things that go round and round. If you want the elixir, then go and tell him directly. Of course, you should prepare something equivalent in return. If you just say, give me an elixir, without giving anything, then Dungeon Master will plug his sword into your asses. The dwarves were used to jokes like this. However, Yi's words were very shocking to the dark elves. Where will he plug the sword? Didn't you listen to Yi's words? Ah, no. The sword, so he will plug the sword. Yes, and unlike Yi, Dungeon Master will be annoyed if you repeat the same things. I recommend that you speak articulately. Thank you. You have been very helpful. Yi, so you should listen to Yi's words. If you follow Yi's words, then you will have no problem getting the elixir. Yes, we will also keep this in mind. There was no answer that she didn't like. Yi thought this was hilarious. Hum. Originally I wasn't going to do this, but I like you, so I will make a specific garden for you on the 15th floor. Something real Lee great. Thank you, Julium said in a grateful tone. But it wasn't unknown if this gratitude would remain after the garden was completed. While Yi was leading the dark elves to a higher floor, I pulled out the lightning god technique skill from my bag. In this life, this is my first attack skill. I only had skill combination and mind's eye. But Lightning God Technique was an attack skill. Name Lightning God Technique, U. Description. A recipe from someone studying lightning. Lightning can be freely handled up to a 12-star cultivation. This was the description of Lightning God Technique. Of course, it wouldn't be entirely learned until he had all 12 stars. Furthermore, the rating of Lightning God Technique was unique. It was an excellent rating for such a vague explanation. However, there were many reasons why it was necessary to become familiar with the Lightning God Technique. The power of Lightning God Technique could help Chrisley as well as allow him to adjust and repair Yu Un-hai's passive. And, maybe, I might be able to get my hands on a special achievement. Gain. Lightning God Technique, U, has been learned. Although the accomplishment is low, you succeed in forming 1 million watt, 1 megawatt, of electric energy in your body. Electric power has been added to the status window. The messages that continuously popped up. The first attack skill, Lightning God Technique, has been added. Good. I felt a strange sensation. I took a few deep breaths as it felt like a snake was coiling around my body. Then the power of the Lightning God Technique settled in my body. Cheek. Static electricity sparked around my body. Not yet. This had a unique rating for a reason. Yu Un-hai could also cause sparks. I learned a few things from experimenting with her. I closed my eyes. Lightning God Technique. It was a snake. It was very sensitive and moved slowly but efficiently. Once loose inside my body, it licked my flesh with its tongue. It was still in the first place where it entered my body. Then it looked around the perimeter. The snake paced for a while before choosing a safe path and beginning to move. It moved between my feet and my head as it caused the passages to widen. After a while, it became hungry and would roam the bloodstream swallowing up magic power. After it swallowed until it was full, the snake made its home just below my belly button. And as if it was excreting, it changed the magic power scattered around to fit its home. The original magic power gained the property of lightning. I allowed it to move freely. However, I was slightly worried. The magic power flowing through the bloodstream. It was also linked to the heart of the Hell Monarch. But there was no friction between the snake and the heart of the Hell Monarch. Rather, it didn't even come close to my heart. It was like the presence of something scary had chased it away on purpose. Still, the passages were clearly laid well. In the future I would be able to use the Lightning God Technique more efficiently. Lightning God Dan has successfully been created. 2 stars can be used to communicate with Lightning God, but a 3rd star is needed to form a Dan. 4 million watts, 4 megawatts, of electric power has been born in your body. Lightning God. Was Lightning God the name of the snake? I started laughing. It was indeed a grand name. I contemplated the Lightning God that had fallen asleep. The magic power in my belly button area had the property of lightning. This was the only Dan. The electric power is 4 million watts. The electric power seemed to increase with every star. After roaming around my body and absorbing 4 times the energy from my magic power, it had fallen asleep. A single Dan had been created. It is tired. Magic power conversion. It was no wonder why the snake was physically and mentally fatigued. But then I opened my eyes. I should check the rest of the items. There was paranormal and wrath left. I should start. At the very least, I needed to check them. I pulled out paranormal that was in the shape of a ring. It was a unique rating and had an option that could reverse the situation. Name paranormal, U. Description. A ring that randomly gives one of 5 different blessings. All stats +2 for 1 hour, recovery, magic power +5 for 30 minutes, grant a powerful attraction and infinite energy. One of these blessings can be given once a day. In particular, the all stats +2, magic power +5 and recovery blessings were like sweet honey. The infinite energy and charm was useless, but there was a fairly high probability of receiving 3 out of 5. I immediately placed paranormal on my left hand index finger. There wasn't a particular reason for sticking it on the index finger. I would just be reminded of the blessings whenever I saw the index finger. The index finger was used to indicate direction. I had some distinct goals and I would be reminded of them every time I looked at paranormal. The size of the ring also fit tightly to my left index finger. Paranormal. The 4 letters in my mouth. All the conditions were met, so I said the name of the item. Soon a message window told me what blessing was given. One of the 5 blessings of paranormal, endless stamina, has been applied. An infinite amount of energy will be received throughout the day. With this ability, it isn't impossible to get the title, King of Virility. I was lost for words. Blood naturally shot to below my abdomen. The blessing of paranormal even had that intention. There is even a title. I was still a man. It would be false to say that I didn't have sexual desires. It existed moderately, but desire didn't make me go crazy like an animal. It's just, the thought of such a title made me nervous. I need to work on it in the future. A title was difficult to obtain. Even a low-grade title could help raise the stats. After thinking about this challenging opportunity, I took out the last item, Wrath. Wrath, an epic grade item, and one of the 7 sins. It was extraordinary just looking at it. The black handle didn't reflect the light and the end curved like a scimitar. However, it wasn't a scimitar. A thick sword approximately 1 meter long. It didn't seem like a long sword or a bastard sword. Really mysterious. What had Oswin aimed for when making a sword with this appearance? I used mind's eye to read the description once again. Name Wrath, Epic, set item. Description. The last piece made by the mythical blacksmith Oswin that even the gods opposed. Characterized by the 7 deadly sins, the evil contained in it was so powerful that Oswin reportedly went crazy. Wrath, such pure evil. Options. Strength +7, epic grade skill, Wrath, is available once every 7 days. It raised stats, but there was also a skill attached. Having 2 options attached was quite rare, plus it was a set item. It was absolutely unbelievable. I watched the Wrath skill. Then an explanation for Wrath came up. Skill, Wrath, epic, strength, magic power, agility and stamina will rise as you enter berserk mode. However, there will be a significant decline in intelligence. Throughout the week, intelligence will gradually recover while you are caught in the desire to destroy. In other words, it was a skill that significantly increased my physical abilities. But intelligence would drastically drop. It would recover over a week, but it was unknown what symptoms would occur. What's more, I already had a penalty of -10 due to the auction. I need to use the skill. I didn't care. Low intelligence didn't mean low mental strength. Intelligence just had a secondary guiding role. If I was caught up in the destructive urge, then I could escape if necessary with my willpower. Furthermore, it wasn't a permanent condition. It might produce irreversible results over a short period of time, but this was my dungeon. Who would make an attempt on my life here? It wasn't an option for now. Wrath. The 2 characters were captured in my mouth. At the same time, strength, stamina, agility and magic power has risen by 8. Intelligence has reduced by 20. The Wrath state has taken over. Defended against 15%. Low intelligence has failed to defend against it. My memory cut out. I opened my eyes. At that moment, a painful headache could be felt. There was also a worn-out feeling in my jaws. I could barely raise my neck from the pain. I was forced to drip some saliva. The entire top floor had been completely destroyed. Yihi's body was trembling as she stared at me with fear. How many days have passed? Why, Yihi was wrong, Master. In the future I won't fall asleep or bother Master. So forgive me. Don't hurt Yihi, Yihi said with tearful eyes and a runny nose. I stiffened. Damn, that state was more effective than I imagined. I never thought I would lose consciousness. My body didn't move to my will. It was unpleasant. The appetite for destruction had taken over. Something had happened in order to make Yihi terrified of me. Yihi, I will not harm you. Yihi sneaked a glance at me. Really? You really won't hurt Yihi? I was testing a skill and the state took over. It wasn't my intention to make the surroundings like this. Fortunately, I didn't touch the dungeon core. It must have been instincts. The Wrath skill suppressed my consciousness, but my instincts still remain. I sighed and pulled out the Flower of Eternity. Take this. It is a flower I purchased at the auction house. It won't wither without water and will grow beautifully. Hiing, Yihi sniffled as she carefully lifted the Flower of Eternity. She had a spirit body but came from the dungeon core. This was why she could exercise physical force. I said afterwards, do you know how many days I have been in that state? It has been 7 days. And Yihi has fearfully spent that time underneath the dungeon core. I was really sad that Master was going to hurt Yihi. I will prevent this from happening in the future. Yes, Master, Yihi answered while wiping at her runny nose and tears. I clicked my tongue. My thoughts towards wrath were too shallow. It wasn't easy to regain my mind in that state. I have to be a little more careful. I hadn't expected that my consciousness would be entirely taken away. In the future, it seemed like I needed to move more carefully. I had rushed into it due to feeling impatient. I needed to make sure never to repeat this mistake. It also lowered intelligence. No matter if it was a secondary role, having it too low wasn't good. I frowned and checked my status window. Name: Randolph Briggseel. Occupation: Demon Earl. Dungeon Master. Title: Indomitable Warrior. XU. All stats +2. First to receive a fairy's blessing. U. Magic power +6. Stats: Strength 79, +9, Intelligence 64, +2. Agility 74, +2, Stamina 80, +2. Magic power 82, +8. Potential: 379 +23 500ths. Electric power: 4 megawatts. Uniqueness: Heart of the Hell Monarch has been transplanted, full strength hasn't been fully opened. Skill combination: R. Mind's Eye. XU. Lightning God Technique. U. Wrath. Epic. A week had passed and all my stats had recovered. The stats that fell from the auction penalty had also recovered. Due to the option attached to Wrath, strength had also increased by 7. The status window itself had no problems. I will refrain from using it unless it is an emergency situation. The real problem was the situation after activating the skill. Strength, agility and stamina might rise but intelligence fell instead. In that state, I couldn't even use Mind's Eye. I would just be like a mad warrior. Of course, there was a penalty, but the Wrath skill was very attractive. It was rare for a skill to increase abilities. The item itself increased strength by 7 and the rest of his physical abilities climbed by 8. When looking at just strength, that was a total rise of 15. The destructive power of that alone was enough to slash an ogre. Anyway, it was an absolute advantage in the area of close combat. But due to the state that couldn't be avoided, I had to refrain from using it unless the circumstances were special. Ah, and Master. The Dark Elf Krasla wanted to see Master a few days ago. I thought I was going to die, but should Yi-He call him? Yi-He, who was staring at the Flower of Eternity, suddenly spoke like she remembered something. I nodded my head. Call him. Right now I am fine. Yes. By the way, Master. You look very tired. Did you know that Yi-He was a little bit of a beekeeper? I can get delicious honey. You should drink honey when feeling tired. A psychic. Her attitude quickly changed from before. Her appearance became more joyful after finding out I had regained my sanity. This was why it was hard to hate the fairy of the dungeon core. Yet I took the self-righteous path and ignored her during my previous life. Bring it. Yes, Master. Please wait a minute. Yi-He will mix a delicious blend. Then I will call Krasla. Yes. Yi-He then went to harvest the honey. She was still holding the Flower of Eternity tightly. I gazed after her and thought about Krasla. It must be about her. I had expected Krasla to come sooner or later. I couldn't meet him for a week, so he must be worried sick. I wanted what he will offer in exchange for the elixir. It was interesting. No matter how unique Krasla and Chrisley were, nothing in this world was free. Lulu Tilda, the secret garden, lush grass, trees and flowers. This had a different atmosphere to the dungeon and was the place that Yi-He prized the most. While the dungeon master was committing brutal violence, she had completed it. She had used points to change the structure and topography of the dungeon as well as decorations. A corner of the garden. Yi-He arrived at the bee farm in a corner of the garden while humming. Master tilde 2 big weapons tilde. Paranormal had given him a blessing of infinite energy, causing his virility to shoot up. The 2 weapons she was referring to was his sword and his organ in his lower extremities. Yi-He sang a strange song while diligently working on the bees. Hello, delicious honey? The bees just shrugged in response. She wanted to tell that beekeepers that the dungeon master was now sane, but Yi-He didn't publicize the matter. Yi-He was his representative. Lala. Her song wasn't over yet. Yi-He's gaze headed elsewhere. It was a linden tree in the center. It had a hole where bees were eagerly gathered. Yi-He pulled out one that was visible. Honey dripped down as Yi-He flew. Master has 2 weapons. Yi flushed as she visualized Dungeon Master's two imposing weapons after being taken over by the state. I frowned as I looked at Krasla in front of me. Absurd, and I sneered fiercely. As expected, Krasla had come to the top floor in order to appeal for an elixir. It was just a direct fastball. But Krasla's expression was serious. I know this is an unreasonable demand. But, Krasla, really need the elixir. I will dedicate my entire body to Dungeon Master. Krasla kneeled down. Krasla's strength when it grew was truly worthy. If he faced one of the 12 dukes right now, then he could push them greatly. But there was a serious problem. Was his head just a decoration? I purchased Krasla so naturally that meant I could use him as I liked. Yet he wanted to exchange himself for an elixir? A ridiculous joke that I never heard of before. Aren't you mistaken? You will assist me? Haha. It was impossible for such words to be okay. I was expecting a little bit more. In my past life, he had been one of the 100 strongest creatures. I had no doubt that he could show that type of capabilities. But he was greatly mistaken if he thought he could just offer his loyalty. It showed how shallow Krasla was. My power is comparable to a Death Knight or Dark Warrior. The ogres and even the vampires aren't a match for me. Hopefully I will be a sword that Dungeon Master can use well. He listed his specifications. I didn't conceal my derision and asked, "Sword, so you are asking to be my sword? Then you can slay Julium and the entire village of Dark Elves here? What does that?" Krasla's eyes widened. He was already disqualified from his position as my sword. A sword needed to be wielded. It couldn't have any doubts. I scoffed and formed a cold expression. He dared lie to me. He said he didn't want Chrisley to be a victim of the vampires, so a contract was signed with the dark spirits. It is really ridiculous sophistry. Do you really think that I would believe him? A misunderstanding. It wasn't a lie. No, that's correct. Our village has relied on each other for many years. Chrisley's body in particular has been weak since birth. My body started shaking at Krasla's words. I opened up my magic power in order to pressure Krasla. In other words, I was telling him to change his attitude. Or I will punish him. This wasn't something that could be solved with conversation. I had definitely given Krasla a lot of opportunities. It seemed he needed a proper education. I said with a little bit of anger, "Krasla, you have wasted your last chance. I offered you a favorable gesture, but you just spat it on the ground. Even if it was at the last moment, if you had given me the truth, then I would have believed in your loyalty." My eyes and voice was filled with rage. Anyone looking at me would know that I was really angry. The reason was Chrisley. I wanted her. She had the blood of a true demonic dragon, so her background wasn't ordinary. I didn't understand why they were so dedicated to Chrisley. If I could listen to the story, then I could get a relationship with a true demonic dragon or obtain some benefits from it. But Krasla had betrayed my expectations. It was ridiculous for a slave to hide something from his master. No matter how high the potential, I didn't need a slave like that. Education and a punishment was required. The slave mark meant he could die with one word, but that was too dull. Listen, Krasla, this is a weapon. Use it to try and stop me. But if you can't do that, then be prepared for the mass genocide of the Dark Elves. My hand squeezed wrath. Krasla was a demonic lancer, so I offered him a long, red spear. It had an option of increasing the owner's abilities to a total of 362. But wrath caused my total stats to be over 400. There was a difference of at least 40. I had the upper hand when just looking at the physical abilities. I also had an extensive amount of combat knowledge. No matter what, Krasla wasn't my opponent. Krasla was also aware of this fact. Sweat dripped down his face as he swallowed his saliva. Tension was evident in his eyes. That is good, but his skills? Could he show something more than his potential? I ran while holding my sword out. Giving time to someone strong or weak was a luxury that I never learned. I always tried my best to smash the enemy. Chong. Krasla managed to lift his spear to block the sword. Krasla's body stumbled slightly from the explosive power. A single clash. Krasla judged that he couldn't face me in power, so he started moving faster. Skill, Demon Sprint. The spear seemed like a vortex as he tried to pressure me. It felt like several spears were simultaneously heading towards me. It was difficult to find the real one hidden in the dazzling movements. However, it was still insufficient. Demon Sprint had a rare skill rating. The skill wasn't enough to narrow the gap between their overwhelming abilities. Chong, tuck, I rolled and the red spear hit the ground. It was a simple task to determine where the spear would hit. Krasla looked at me with a dazed expression. He never imagined that I would identify his skill. It was proof that he had never met someone strong. Is this the end? At this level, you aren't worthy of being my sword. I snubbed Krasla. Krasla's fists clenched as he turned red and his eyes narrowed. It was like a reptile's eyes were looking at me. Black scales started to form on his face and his teeth and nails started to change. Dragon's Stampede. It was Krasla's skill with a unique rating. Grr. Krasla made a sound similar to a beast. I was very curious about his state and used Mind's Eye. Name: Krasla. Occupation: Demonic Lancer. Title: * person with dragon's blood. R. Strength +4. Stats: Strength 74, +4, Intelligence 59. Agility 65, Stamina 83. Magic Power 77. Potential 358 +4 437. Uniqueness: a slave inscription is carved on the body. The skill, Dragon's Stampede, has been triggered. After all previously learned skills have been used, the racial special skill can be activated. After Dragon's Stampede is completed, the active skills will return to its original state. Skill: Dragon's Breath. U. Hard Scales. R. Sharp Attack. R. Danger Detection. XR. His abilities hadn't changed. Instead, the skills had changed. The existing Dragon's Stampede, U, and Demon Sprint, R, was gone and had been replaced with 4 other skills. An unusual skill. I had never fought Krasla in my previous life. I had only heard rumors. This was the first time I had seen the skill Dragon's Stampede. The previous learned skill had triggered some special skills. It was good if a skill could be evolved, but it was useless if they didn't know how to use it. Dragon's Stampede was an ambiguous skill. I need to be careful of Dragon's Breath. The rest is just melee combat. Melee combat. I was the best in that field. I laughed and raised Wrath. At that moment, Krasla moved. I took a step back and wielded Wrath. Krasla showed a tremendous reaction rate as he avoided the sword while moving forward. It was like he had perceived the movement before I made it. Danger Detection skill. It became clearer after several more attacks. Danger detection was always on. But it wasn't universal. Even without the skill, I was able to read all of Krasla's movements. But Krasla only relied on his senses to read my movements. The difference was very huge. The sword was thrust indefinitely. One miss would be an irreversible wound. Puik, Kakik. Wrath was thrust deep in his chest. Krasla shouted as blood gushed out. Not yet, but Krasla's eyes were still full of fighting spirit. Krasla grabbed my sword and took a significantly deep breath. There was a pulsating sound as a significant amount of magic power was detected. I soon realized the identity of the magic power. Dragon's Breath. I sucked the magic power that Krasla gathered into my mouth. Quajijijik. Lightning God technique moved due to the disturbance in magic power. The Dragon's Breath had a fire attribute while I let the lightning attribute flow through my sword. The 2 different types of magic power clashed inside my body. Kiik. The skill wasn't cancelled, but it ran rampant. The aftermath affected Krasla. Smoke started to rise from all openings in his body. A large amount of blood started flowing. The reason he hadn't died instantly was the dragon's blood. I pulled back the blood-stained Wrath. I said calmly and cruelly, I won. The 50 Dark Elves received my call and went up to the top floor. They stared with wide eyes and disbelieving expressions at the tattered Krasla. Krasla was called the clan's ultimate warrior. It was unbelievable. Krasla was lying unconscious on the floor. It was obvious from his state that he was the only one who received significant damage. And I was sitting on top of Krasla's body while wearing a half-skull mask. You're late. It is great to see Dungeon Master. Julium identified the alarming atmosphere and kneeled down. The rest of the elves also took the same position. It doesn't look like everyone is here? Julium quickly answered. Chrisley's state has worsened, so she can't come up here. Please forgive us. I made it clear that all the Dark Elves were to come to the top floor. Isn't this the same as not listening to me? Julium's eyes filled with panic. That is impossible. Dungeon Master is our sky and owner. You tried to deceive me. Listen. I stood up and stared down at the Dark Elves. Listen to my words without any interruptions. I gave you many chances to tell the truth, but you seem intent on hiding it. To my disappointment, Krasla even showed a shameful appearance when fighting with me. He even disagreed with my commands. Why should I treat you guys nicely? You aren't even qualified to be called slaves. Gulp. The dark elves swallowed their saliva. The opened magic power was effective in planting fear in them. The powerful magic power weighed down on their shoulders and they couldn't even say excuses. The moment they tried to open their mouths, their necks seemed to be cut. They could only shake and bow their heads. It was what I intended. I also wore the skull mask to create this situation. I looked down at the dark elves and declared, "The sin will be paid with your lives." Wait a minute, please wait a minute, Dungeon Master. Shortly after the declaration, Julium urgently raised his head from the floor. Most of the slaves were in a downwards posture. But I didn't show anything on my hardened face. Who gave you permission to speak? I will tell you everything. So please judge us wisely. Kung. Julium hit his forehead against the ground. Blood flowed down his face, but he didn't seem to care. Somehow I could see his fierce struggle to survive. He realized that I wasn't lying. And indeed, it wasn't a lie. Krasla and Chrisley might have high value, but I had no regrets over the fate of the rest of the Dark Elves. Julium gazed at the other Dark Elves with sadness in his eyes. Then the previously fainted Krasla stretched out his hand towards Julium. No, Piok. I kicked Krasla in the stomach. Krasla's body flew a few meters before landing on the ground. Krasla was stunned once again. At the same time, there was a short but long silence. To the Dark Elves, it felt like 1 second or 1 minute had passed. It has to be a very important story. If it isn't good, then all of you, including Krasla and Chrisley, will be hurt. I said without any emotions. It was really uncommon for me to be merciful. Despite becoming more magnanimous after going back, but I was curious about Chrisley's story. A true demonic dragon was a legendary creature. It could easily devour the devil. It was obvious that anyone who owned it would become similar to a devil. Julium finally opened his mouth. I only want to ask one more thing before that. Please, I'll allow it. Go ahead. My story will be a big help to Dungeon Master. Then can Chrisley become your eternal companion? Eternal companion. I had heard of it before. It had a similar to a wedding among the Dark Elves and was conducted through a special ritual. The ceremony would take place under the full moon as a naked man and woman entered. For a period of time before that, they would only consume water and would carve lines of blood on each other's bodies. During the ceremony, their bodies couldn't be mixed until it was completely purified of any wastes, and then the bond would come to fruition on the following full moon. The Dark Elves had strong vitals, so it was possible for them to starve for a month. The problem was that I didn't know why I should do that with Chrisley. There was no reason to do such a troublesome thing. You don't know your position, I said coldly, and Julium reacted urgently. He didn't wipe up the blood that spurted everywhere. That's not it. It's just, I was just thinking it would be a great help to Dungeon Master. The ceremony will help me? That's right, and in order to explain it, I need to tell you Chrisley's pedigree first. Go ahead. Chrisley was born from the Sun King Aogen Nim and the Moon Queen Sheila Nim. She inherited the thick blood of the Dark Elves and the true demonic dragon. I knew from the title that Aogen's blood flowed through her. But there was also the blood of the Dark Elves. The top Dark Elf among Dark Elves. I never imagined that her other parent would be linked to a top name among the high-class creatures. Then what about Krasla? Did he inherit the same blood? Technically not. He just had Aogen's blood infused in him. He is Chrisley's guard. He doesn't know, but he was essentially created to protect Chrisley. I lightly nodded. Indeed, I had felt something strange from the title. Krasla's title was Person with Dragon's Blood. Aogen's lineage running through his blood was lower. It could be understood through an infusion of blood. Now it seemed to fit the facts. Julium then continued, but the alignment of the two bloods are too different. In addition, the balance didn't match. The Sun King's blood was a little more dominant, so the remaining blood of the Moon Queen developed a curse. Really a true demonic dragon. It was enough to stop the characteristics of the Dark Elves. I could make a guess about the curse. That is the Ice Dragon's curse. That's right, the elixir is the only hope to improve it. But the elixir is a divine drink. It is an item that we don't even dare dream about. But due to the combination of Aojan Nim and Sheila Nim's blood, Chrisley is destined for death, so there is no other way. Certainly her life would have already ended once she was old enough. It was amazing that she was even still alive. Is that why you committed yourselves to the dark spirits? It was the only way remaining, due to our lack of strength. We tried to obtain an elixir as collateral, but the dark spirits wouldn't budge. Instead, it told us how we could obtain an elixir. Use the points of a dungeon master in order to obtain the elixir. Reckless. An absurd gamble. In addition, the elixir would recover some of her strength, but it wasn't a solution. They knew that but recklessly formed a contract for a chance at obtaining an elixir. I looked at Julium like he was stupid. We were desperate. The helplessness of not being able to do anything. We couldn't let go of the child that is the incarnation of the Dark Elves. Anyway, now Chrisley only has a lifespan of a few months left. This final gamble was based on the entire clan's desire. So, Dungeon Master, please take pity on Chrisley. The Dark Elves will devote themselves to your Dungeon Master, please help Chrisley. Save the life of our child, please, please. Kung. Julium pounded his head into the ground. Ceremony? He was asking me to undertake the ceremony. It would tie Chrisley to me as well as improve the situation. If I agreed, then Julium and the Dark Elves would die for me with smiles on their faces. I thought for a moment. Chrisley had that type of history. This was a much bigger fish than I thought. If I can solve the problem of the energy imbalance, then both the Dark Elf and true demonic dragon nature can be expressed. Interesting. Simply put, I had to punch yin magic power into her blood. But that wasn't enough. The true demonic dragon's blood will burn up the yin magic power. Conversely, it can upset the balance in Chrisley's body and ignite a battlefield. It is an impossible task. Harmony, yes, harmony is needed. This is called yin-yang? This was an essential part of the universe. If I mixed it without removing either of the yin or yang, then problems wouldn't occur. It was possible in theory. If I take advantage of the lightning god technique to harmonize the blood of the dark elf and true demonic dragon, then it isn't impossible. I need more research. Lightning god was nestled in my body. I had a sudden thought. The snake changed the property of the magic power to lightning. It was possible to neutralize the other two properties. And couldn't I eat the magic power? I might be able to use lightning god to take advantage of the results. Of course, I could only successfully absorb 10% if I embraced Chrisley, but that would be a considerable help. Time is needed. My achievements in that skill hadn't reached the appropriate level. Anyway, this story was likely to be a great help to me. It was good that I heard it. I turned my attention back to them. It isn't a bad suggestion. If this is true, then I will help restore Chrisley. I will also review the ceremony. Then? Eyes full of expectations turned towards me. I shook my head and betrayed their expectations. But I will say one thing. I have already declared your deaths. So, the hearts of the Dark Elves started pounding. Their lives could be taken with one word. I slowly opened my mouth. All of you will move on all fours and bark like a dog. Forget that you are Dark Elves. I will closely watch you for 1 month. During that time, if you act like people instead of dogs, then your lives will be taken. Conversely, if you perform wonderfully, then I will use the ritual to heal Chrisley. The Dark Elves needed to act like dogs for 1 month. This was a very good status upgrade. At least dogs were beasts with absolute loyalty to their owner. Other demons wouldn't have allowed them to live. Julium looked up at me with strange eyes. I said with a cold smile, "Bark. Dogs don't talk." After a week, the dungeon's 15th floor. Bark, bark, pant, pant, pant. Surprisingly, the Dark Elves fully adapted to being dogs. The 50 Dark Elves crawling on all fours was a spectacular sight. It was even reproduced when it came to the meals. This was the amazing result of their obsession with life and fulfilling their lives' desires. Chrisley was the only exception to that position. But she couldn't even walk, so it didn't matter. In contrast, Krasla rolled around like a loyal dog. And Krasla was the most passionate one among the Dark Elves about imitating a dog. It is time to eat. Yihi brought the dog food. Yihi mixed in several different types of foods to look like dog food. Yihi was viciously monitoring them. Yihi liked Julium, but the dungeon master's command was absolute. Yihi persistently watched the Dark Elves day and night. Bark. Julium was the first to take initiative. He had to set an example. To be honest, I didn't think he would stay as a dog when he first started imitating it. Julium ate from the dog bowl and then Krasla sat next to him. The food also looks good to Yihi. Next time, I'll give a living chicken as a specialty. The taste of biting its neck. Yihi's attitude changed and she really treated them like pets. The faces of the dark elves darkened but they didn't dare show it to Yihi. They just shook their ass hard like there were tails there. It had been a month. The dark elves faithfully obeyed what I said. This area surprised me a little bit. Yihi wouldn't be negligent when guarding. Yihi always faithfully followed my commands. She would catch the slightest hint of a mistake. But they held on tenaciously. The dark elves proved their value. They would be quite useful as guard dogs. And I didn't just play for a month. I raised the achievements of the lightning god technique to 7 stars. I also studied Chrisley's interior and concluded that it was possible. Exactly 1 month afterwards, I fed Chrisley a bottle of elixir. A few days later, I could determine that Chrisley's appearance had changed as I led her to a moonlit place. Today was the full moon, the time with the most yin magic power. Chrisley's body was stiff with tension. A mixed race dark skin. The contrast between the yellow skin and white hair looked good. The eyes an unusual soft purple. Her features had a sickly appearance but she had a voluminous body. A beautiful woman that many people would focus on. I threw off my clothes. The ceremony would be conducted in the nude. We had carved each other's bodies for 1 month and it would be combined on the last day. The ceremony was also needed in order to stabilize the magic power inside Chrisley's body. I looked Chrisley up and down and said, "Take it off." Chrisley's eyes became resolute. She was aware of her predicament. She succeeded in recovering some stamina due to the elixir but the ice dragon's curse was unaffected. Instead, it actually gnawed away at her life force quicker. The other dark elves might not know but Chrisley did. That was the reason why. Chrisley opened her mouth. "Dungeon Master, I want to say something." "What?" Chrisley looked at me with soft, violet eyes. "My body isn't normal. I drank the elixir but my status is getting worse. I have 5 or 6 months at best. My body is becoming as cold as ice. I can't comply with Dungeon Master's wishes." It made a lot of sense. In the first place, the elixir wasn't an absolute cure. She had received heaven's vengeance since she was born so the elixir couldn't stop it. It would only increase her life by a few months at best. It seemed like she was giving in so I asked, "Why are you asking me this? The Dungeon Master can give you an unlimited amount of elixirs." Then Chrisley shook her head. "I can't do something so disgraceful. And no matter how much I drink, the elixir can't cure my body." Wasn't Dungeon Master also aware of that fact before the ceremony? As a child, I dreamed of someone rescuing me but I've already given up on that. This ceremony will only cause misfortune. I'm sorry to Elder Julium but I can't meet your expectations. Then do you want the rest of the Dark Elves to die? Their lives will be collateral if you are useless. Chrisley's eyes widened at my words. It was an expression showing she would comply. "It is destiny." I frowned as it seemed like she had given up. Was she frustrated because her last hope, the elixir, failed? An attitude of meeting death. Her attitude was more like a worm than a cockroach. Chrisley saw my face and said, "Dungeon Master, we have also come from the demon world. That is a place defined by power. I know deep down that Dungeon Master has mercy. After Elder Julium deliberately hid me, he was forced by another demon elder to cut his hair and was ridiculed. Despite losing his old life, he promised you this ceremony in exchange for the elixir. I will return this favor." I was impressed with Chrisley. Not many demons would keep promises unless their life was at risk. Demons could be very cruel to those who were weak. But unlike ordinary demons, I could see the potential of others with mind's eye. However, those with high potential could still be weak. Those who were lacking right now could be a great help to me later. For those people, I would show them a wide generosity. A prime example was Chrisley in front of me. If it wasn't for Chrisley and Krasla's presence then Julium would have died. Having them imitate a dog was troublesome. I smiled and opened my mouth. "How are you going to pay me back? Don't you have 5 or 6 months at best to live?" I am saying this with a smile. My body might be cold, but I am prepared. I am strong enough to undergo the ceremony. It is up to you. The ceremony was one of the most glorious moments in a dark elf's life. It was given to me. She was convinced that her time was running out. I didn't like that attitude towards death. Either way, I would go into the pit laughing. I didn't like her words. There was a need to correct her attitude towards death. I would fight desperately in the face of death. Quack. I forcefully tore apart the thin silk dress that Chrisley was wearing. At the same time, her resilient breasts and body were revealed. But she did not resist. She had accepted the whole thing. I looked down at the breathtaking sight of Chrisley's body and said, "I will help you live, so you will have to live for me." Today was the full moon. It was when yin magic power was the most powerful. In response, the inherent power of a dark elf in her power raised its head slightly. Even so, it was still lacking compared to the blood of the true demonic dragon, so balance was important. The lightning god technique had reached 7 stars. The amount of electric power was 6.4 million watts. It wasn't comparable to real lightning, but it would be introduced through skin contact. I placed my hands on Chrisley's body and slowly moved the lightning god. I wanted to see the areas where the yin magic power was blocked. I need to pierce through one. Originally, magic power would flow hot throughout a body. In contrast, I could feel a cold magic power. It also flowed slightly differently through her body. Chrisley's yin magic power was badly accumulated in some areas. After piercing through, a wide passage would appear before it was clogged again. I gently touched the yin magic power. Lightning god, it is your turn. The lightning snake in my abdomen. Its name was Lightning God. The lightning god twitched with annoyance but moved into Chrisley's body. Chrisley, who was watching my actions, widened her eyes as she felt something entering her. "Put up with it, don't make a sound." Quang. At that moment, the 6.4 million power of Lightning God arrived at the first gateway. Lightning God aggressively slammed its head into the first blockage. Chrisley's body trembled. Somehow she managed to suppress the groan as her fists clenched tightly. Her 10 toes scraped the ground. Her body bent like a bow as a cold sweat appeared, but she didn't make a sound. Tricky. My expression was also determined. Just before, the impact had failed to pierce through. I needed to drill through the first gateway, but I didn't know if Chrisley's body could hold on. But I couldn't wait until the next full moon. The magic of the dark elf was bursting, so today was the day. This was a golden opportunity to absorb some of the true demonic dragon's magic power. If I could at least surpass one gateway. It won't be easy. Don't let go of your spirit. I was unfamiliar with whispering sweet words to someone. The best I could do was to tell her to endure it. Chrisley nodded while biting her lips. Lightning God continued its barrage as its tail shook wildly. Quang. A rough storm occurred. It looked even more painful as Chrisley's body twisted. But my hands didn't fall from Chrisley's body. Energy was leaking from her body. I was safe, but that wouldn't last long. If magic power flowed back from Chrisley's body, then I could receive a big wound. It was self-explanatory what would happen if I withdrew Lightning God now. My eyes became more serious. I had to see it through to the end once I started it. Chrisley couldn't regain her spirit. The unimaginable pain made her want to drift away. She thought she had become used to pain, but this was different. It felt like thousands of needles were inside her body. But she had to be patient. She also didn't make a sound. Honestly, any man would feel something in front of Chrisley. A feeling where they wanted to save her. She didn't have any hope. There were numerous attempts to save her. They all ended in frustration. The elixir had been her only hope, and even that failed. Therefore, Chrisley's heart had given up. Krasla Opa and Elder Julium had great expectations, but she wasn't expecting much. If there were fewer expectations, then she wouldn't be disappointed. And despite the elixir improving her status, she didn't say anything once it started deteriorating again. Their eyes would fill with sympathy. But this man, he didn't have any sympathy in his eye. Why? His eyes seemed to see through her. At first, she thought it was just an excuse to take her body. She was well aware that many demons wouldn't give up such a sweet ritual. It was impossible, but if the life of the clan was saved for the elixir, then she would spend what remained of her life devoted towards him. Is it possible? But the thought sprouted in her brain. A pain that a demon couldn't adapt to was serious. Quang. Who? The pain was the only evidence that she was alive. She gave up and descended into the pain. The intense pain in her body made her feel strange. It was like every one of her cells was surviving a little bit more. Ah, Quang. Was she mistaken? The shock was painful. Rather, it was an awful pleasure. Her blood moved more quickly. It felt like the vitality in her body was fluctuating and spiking. Chrisley was convinced. The forbidden curse in her body had relaxed a little bit. Can I live? She threw a questioning look towards the demon. She wanted to do many things, but her body was too weak. She tried to say something. And with that joy and hope, Chrisley lost consciousness. The full moon shone. Moonlight flowed in an enclosed space. In the meantime, there was a noticeable change in Chrisley's appearance. Her pale complexion took on a dignified atmosphere. A body with an unparalleled beauty. Her expression also came alive. It was hard to believe she was the same person who had accepted death. The magic power of the true demonic dragon and dark elf was harmonized as much as possible. I smiled towards Chrisley, who was standing a little bit away from me. I carefully moved towards her delightful breasts. Then my mouth opened and my tongue caressed her chest. My tongue moved along the bloodlines carved on Chrisley. I bit my tongue while it brushed against the blood marks. It was like a fuse had been lit. Usually my fingers would carve new marks, but today was the last day. The ceremony was different. My entire body was engraved with many blood marks. Chrisley's blood was needed for the ceremony. I felt a warmth in my chest and opened mind's eye. Name: Chrisley. Occupation: nun. Title: person with the blood of a true demonic dragon. Epic: intelligence +6, magic power +6. Blessed by the moon. XU, magic power +8. Stats: strength 23, intelligence 94, +6. Agility 21, stamina 27. Magic power 46, +14. Potential: 211 + 2478. Uniqueness: a person with the true demonic dragon Aogen and the dark elf Sheila's blood. The end of her growth can't be seen. Skill: none. Before and after comparison. Strength 19, intelligence 100, agility 21, stamina 1, magic 34, potential 176 + 3 478. Strength 23, intelligence 100, agility 21, stamina 27, magic 60, potential 211 + 2478. Stamina and magic power had risen significantly. Her physical abilities were still low, but it was an incredible growth when looking at the past. Of course, I also went through changes. It was only a change to the lightning god technique. I stared with bitterness at my status window. Name: Randolph Briggseel. Occupation: demon earl. Dungeon master. Title: indomitable warrior. XU. All stats +2. First to receive a fairy's blessing. U. Magic power +6. Stats: strength 79, +9, intelligence 64, +2. Agility 74, +2, stamina 80, +2. Magic power 82, +8. Potential: 379 + 23 500. Electric power: 6.4 megawatts. Uniqueness: Heart of the Hell Monarch has been transplanted, full strength hasn't been fully opened. Changes have occurred in the lightning god technique since swallowing a huge amount of magic power. The results are unpredictable. Skill combination: R, Mind's Eye. XU, Lightning God Technique, Wrath, Epic. No stats increase or title. That damn snake had swallowed all the dragon and dark elf magic released from Chrisley. It was now lying underneath my belly button looking like it was dead. Thanks to that, there were 3 question marks next to the Lightning God Technique skill. This was the first time I couldn't anticipate the results. Take this. I took out the command magic book and the death wand. Despite the blood marks engraved on my head, Chrisley was still puzzled by my behavior. Dungeon Master. What is this? A new occupation and skill and a wand for you to use. Chrisley's face filled with determination and she said, I will learn it to the best of my ability. Learn it after you are fully recovered. Do you know how? Yes, I studied while under the contract with the dark spirits. I didn't bother explaining any more. I noticed that Chrisley was having trouble balancing her body. She had been unsure of my intentions during the last month. After breaking through the first gateway, her attitude towards me had completely changed. I gave her hope. After escaping from her constraints, Chrisley changed completely. In addition, she seemed to have figured out my personality. Since the first day, Chrisley had never worked against me. Time to go out. It was time to leave the dungeon and return to the guild. I had been away for more than a month. I don't know how Lightning God technique will change, but I shrugged. It had already passed. Lightning God had absorbed all the magic power. I could only hope that it progressed in a good direction. I still looked at Chrisley. Chrisley's cheeks flushed. The ceremony wasn't over. Combining the bond was still required for the ceremony. Chrisley carefully put down the book and death wand and nodded. Her mind was prepared. I pulled Chrisley towards me. Then I devoured her lips. The ceremony ended the next day. I left the dungeon. Krasla was next to me. Dungeon Master, is it okay if I join you? Krasla asked under the intense sunlight. The pointed ears of a dark elf was hidden with the help of a magic earring. At first glance, his skin looked like a black man. Furthermore, the earring had the option of automatically translating every language. It wouldn't be an issue if Krasla accompanied him. Chrisley told me, "You have the role of a teacher among the Dark Elves." Krasla nodded at my words. "That's right, I've taught the Dark Elves basic swordsmanship and how to deal with some creatures. You will do the same now. You will teach my humans." I never learned from someone, so my teaching skills were embarrassingly bad. Someone was needed to teach Yu Hai and the other awakened in my group. So I used Krasla. In addition, it wouldn't be bad if he was used as a member of my raid group. Krasla currently had no work to do in the dungeon anyway. Krasla's eyes widened and he clapped with an understanding expression. "The humans under you? Ah, you are playing?" "Similar. Right now, it was a game that couldn't be seen. The level of the humans were far too weak." Krasla's eyes lit up. "I understand. I won't interfere with Dungeon Master's game." After fixing Chrisley, the eyes of the Dark Elves had changed towards me. For them, Chrisley was the incarnation of a Dark Elf. Faith. So it would work. The Dark Elves would obey any decisions like they were my dogs. Krasla was the same as well. His true role was Chrisley's guard. He was happier than anyone that Chrisley was cured. In fact, Krasla was the one who tried hardest to imitate a dog during the previous month. Chrisley was more important than his pride as a warrior. He would die for her. Now his position was completely concluded. I said casually, "In the future, just call me Master." "I understand, Master." They both started descending the mountain. Chapter 38-40, Heaven's Will. The guild house located in Yeoksamdong, Gangnam. It was a 5-story building that the Heaven's Will members could use at any time. In less than a year, Kim Yong-woo had earned enough from the dungeon to buy a building in Gangnam. For some reason, today there were hundreds of people lining up outside the Guildhouse of Heaven's Will. Awakened number 359. Awakened number 359, please come in. Several helpers dressed in yellow were directing the people in front of the building. The people in front showed a number to the guild helper and were allowed inside the building. Krasla looked at them with amazement and said, "This place is Heaven's Will, Master?" "That's right." I lightly nodded. I had described Heaven's Will to Krasla while descending the mountain. He was going to be staying here in the future, so he was a bit stunned. It was the first time I had seen so many people lined up outside the guild house. Are they all awakened? I used mind's eye to look at the line and found that all of them were awakened. It must be a recruitment. The personnel of the guild was increasing. Thanks to the safety zone, a stable core was formed and now they could raise the guild. Heaven's Will was a presence that couldn't be ignored in South Korea. It was natural to increase the manpower. Earth is a fairly funny place. The buildings aren't that high. Krasla expressed his admiration. He had been in this state since descending the mountain. Earth and the demon world were completely different worlds. Krasla had lived in the poor area of the demon world, so it was natural for him to be amazed. However, he wasn't overwhelmed by it. Besides, he was aware of things like science and technology. A zone of strong people. Krasla came from a place where the winners gobbled up everything. A warrior who was always tense found it a pleasure when they could relax. Actually, it was difficult to Krasla to experience an unprecedented tragedy in South Korea. This wasn't his home. Krasla's total stats equaled 362 and his strength was equivalent to an advanced LV3 creature. At this level, he was impervious to most modern weapons. I said to him, "This is unusually severe. At any rate, let's go." It wasn't an uncommon sight in Gangnam. I could see it in the future anyway, so there was no time to be surprised. I walked towards the entrance of the guild house. It would be funny if a member of the Heavens Will raid group Devil Hunters needed to stand in line. What is that? Don't interrupt, bastards, are your eyes filled with knots? Don't you see this line? There was a hail of protests. The awakened cursed at him. Master, what should I do? Krasla frowned and asked me. It was a good thing. I thought he might have moved after hearing the harsh words. Asking my opinion meant that Krasla was aware of his position. A slave wasn't supposed to move without a command. Ignore it, I understand. Reacting was a terrible idea. It would just waste time. I was at the entrance when a yellow-dressed person blocked my path. If you are interested in joining the guild, then line up. Who are you? A member of Heaven's Will, Kim Chul-sun. If you don't line up, then you can't go inside. Kim Chul-sun. Who was this? I had never seen his face before. He must be a new member that joined while I was gone. Randolph Brigzeal. I am the captain of the Heavens Will raid group, Devil Hunters. There isn't a raid group with that name in Heaven's Will. That's impossible. I have a spot and Yu Un Hai and Li Ji Hai are members. There are no guild members with that name. I'm sorry, but can you listen to the instructors? It was a strange twist. I had frequently left the guild. Of course, I was gone for more than a month this time, but for the raid group to be gone? It was a really troubling reaction. There was also Yu Un Hai and Li Ji Hai. Strange. It was definitely odd. It would be normal if he never heard about the raid group. But he also didn't know Yu Un Hai and Li Ji Hai's name. Kim Chul-sun's expression crumpled up. Can you stop standing here? Do you know how long people have been lining up? Ah, fuck. Or are you a foreigner who doesn't speak Korean well? Randolph, what? Master, should I also ignore this? Krasla asked. The magic earrings gave unnecessarily detailed translations so he could understand all the vulgar words being spoken. I thought for a moment and said, is Kim Yong-woo here? No. Is the guild master your friend? He's not inside? What does it matter if he is inside? You are really crazy. Kim Chul-sun grabbed my shoulder. I didn't budge despite his attempts to forcefully throw me. What? Why aren't you moving? He started doubting his own strength. His total stats barely passed 180, so of course I wouldn't even tremble. Bring me to Kim Yong-woo, or I will go find him myself. What's going on? Another yellow-dressed guild member spoke. He came over to Kim Chul-sun. Kim Chul-sun withdrew his hand from my shoulder and shrugged. No, this guy called the name of the guildmaster like he is a friend. The captain of the group Devil Hunters? Do we have such a raid group? Devil Hunters? Isn't the naming sense like that of a king's? Both of them are foreigners. One black and one is white. Handsome. Are they models? Perhaps they have the wrong building? They seem to be ignoring my words. I tried to handle this quietly, but it couldn't be helped. I will go find him myself. I threw a glance towards Krasla. Krasla nodded and took out his spear holder. A long, red iron spear popped up. Kill then? Alive. Moderately breaking the body is okay. I understand. The guild members, including Kim Chul-sun, had absurd expressions on their faces. They had been selected to join the guild. Yet this person wanted to use a spear against them. Kim Chul-sun and the other guild members pulled out their own weapons. Aren't those just good words? You will be the ones chopped up in combat. Kim Chul-sun, who was holding his sword in a leisurely manner, laughed. The most outstanding new members had received a rare grade sword as a gift. This was a treasure with a very high cutting force. Naturally, he would look confident. This sword is familiar. It was similar to a sword that I sprinkled over the dungeon. In the end, it was a sword taken from my dungeon. It felt weird seeing him boast about it. I understand, master. 5 seconds will be enough. Krasla took an attack posture with his spear. Oh, those dirty words. You will regret it. Before his words finished, Puhung, Kayok, Kim Chul-sun was hit by the dull end of the spear and fell down like a frog. The remaining 2 guild members walked a similar path. 3 guild members were collapsed on the ground. Krasla said 5 seconds, but it took less than 5 seconds. A truly overwhelming sight. It had happened with hundreds of applicants watching. Master, their bones are too tender, so they fainted after I broke it. Should I continue? Krasla said as he placed his leg on Kim Chul-sun's right arm. The force was different from a spear, so he could control it to break a bone, not take their lives. His actions were very cautious. I shook my head. That's okay. Let's go. Familiar faces started to be seen after entering the guild house. They were astonished when they saw me like I was a dead man who had returned alive. I'm being treated as a dead man. I organized their reactions in my head. It had been more than a month without any guild contact, so they seemed to think I had died. Of course, even the Devil Hunters raid group that I formed was disbanded. But it was still questionable where Yu Un Hai and Li Ji Hai were. I went to the elevator and pressed the button for the 5th floor. Just as the door was about to close, many guild members boarded. "Why, you are?" Among them, a man turned towards me with his mouth wide open. I lightly greeted him. "Your name was Kim Tae-wan? It's been a while." I lightly greeted him. He was one of the 12 people that I cleared the 1st floor with. A moderately influential person in the guild. In addition, he also planned some hell training in the dungeon, so he was fairly popular. He closed his mouth and frowned. "I thought you were dead?" I threw a glance towards Kim Tae-wan, who was going to the same floor as me. Then I answered with a smile. "Who said that?" "A guild member saw you entering the dungeon." "Stupid. Don't you know my skills? It is natural to think you were dead after entering the dungeon for more than a month." "So the raid group Devil Hunters has been dismissed?" Kim Tae-wan's eyebrows rose. "It seems like you were going to meet the guild master, but there is no room in this guild. There are many new people with good skills. I also have a rare rated skill. I can also deal with 2 orcs. A claim like he was showing off. Handling 2 orcs. But Kim Tae-wan's attitude was somehow awkward. I was puzzled and asked, "Is that something to celebrate?" "I don't want to hear those words. I'll be leaving now." Ding dong tilde. Soon the elevator doors opened. 5th floor. The place where the guild members were resting could be seen. Kim Tae-wan exited the elevator first. The others followed behind him. "Master, should I sweep everything away?" "That's fine," I said to Krasla. I needed to know what the problem was first before solving it. "I will meet the guild master. I would make a detailed assessment after hearing the story." I didn't think that Kim Yong-woo would dismiss my raid group. Moments ago, Kim Tae-wan had went off with the other guild members. In their eyes, my raid was an eyesore. Kim Yong-woo would have been helpless after I was away for a month or so. I could understand that much. On the contrary, I didn't think he needed to be punished. By the way, the piercing gazes that came the moment the elevator opened. I turned and looked at them. The 5th floor was a multi-purpose room with many paintings. Half the people had familiar faces while the other half was unfamiliar. The personnel had significantly increased over the last month. Most of the existing guild members were paying attention to me. They weren't friendly. I noticed that some were staring at Krasla and I like we were enemies. Kim Tae-wan had frowned, but he hadn't looked at me like an enemy. Then, advice? Be careful of others since they would also grow, was the meaning behind his words. I had thought his attitude was unnatural. There was no reason to suddenly boast of the new personnel and his rare skill. I simply misjudged it as the logic of a strong man. In the end, it turned out like this. Ha! Laughter burst out. A unique situation. This was the 5th floor. A place that was like a picture gallery. But now it looked different from before. They were divided into several groups. A sight that was definitely discrimination. Factions. I came up with the word. At any rate, a lot of changes had occurred in a month. I walked forward while ignoring them. The guild master's office was on the central left. I stood in front of the door and said to Krasla, "Wait here. I understand, master." Rattle. I opened the door and saw Kim Yong-woo wearing glasses while looking through some paperwork. "Who?" I told no one to come for a while. "It's me." Kim Yong-woo flinched as he heard my voice and turned towards me. He gave a cry of "Hyuk" and fell out of his chair. After a few moments, Kim Yong-woo sat back at his desk as he took his glasses off and rubbed his tired eyes. "I've been awake for 3 days and 3 nights, so I must be dreaming. I heard that raid group Devil Hunters was disbanded." Kim Yong-woo was shocked as he heard that name. "Why, you are really Randolph Nim? Is there a fake Randolph?" Oh my God. Thank God." Kim Yong-woo trembled. He seemed like someone who was meeting a real god and didn't know what to do. "I want to know why the raid group was disbanded." I cut to the chase and Kim Yong-woo swallowed his saliva at the question. Everybody knew that Master Nim had died. Oh, of course, I didn't think that. Why is my death the cause of the raid group being disbanded? Kim Yong-woo had nothing to hide, so he naturally said, "No, that's not it. It is a misconception. The raid group wasn't disbanded. It's just, should I say it is in a temporarily postponed state?" Postponed state? Yes, that's correct. 20 days ago, problems started to emerge as the guild expanded. It was pointed out that too much preferential treatment was given to devil hunters. Go on. Kim Yong-woo licked his lips and started to tell a long story. At first I ignored it. There were protests, but my heart considered it an easy matter. But the flames continued to spread. It became a witch hunt. They argued that it was ridiculous to keep a raid group that only had 3 members. Kim Yong-woo wiped the sweat off his forehead and continued. At the time, I was busying expanding the members and occupying the safety zones. I misjudged and didn't take care of it properly. I thought I could resolve it when Master Nim came back. But I didn't come back. I was busy solving the problem of Krasla and Chrisley and was gone for more than a month. This incident happened in the meantime, Kim Yong-woo said with a gloomy face. Yes, more time passed. The atmosphere became worse for every new person that came. The new and existing guild members started speaking up. There are the people that I established the guild with. They decided to get directly involved with the operation of the guild. Kim Yong-woo shrugged. It is all my fault. The guild has become bigger and gathered more attention. I never imagined that guild politics would occur. So I have become useless. Now I live my life buried in a pile of paperwork. Really, I'm really sorry. Kim Yong-woo bowed deeply. A gesture that wasn't false. He himself admitted that he didn't have an academic background. He had risen to the position of a guild master, but this was the first time he had operated a guild. It became noisy and the guild split into factions. It was too late once he noticed it. Without realizing it, guild politics had occurred and his power as a guild master weakened. The guild house and guild was established by Kim Yong-woo, but it was jointly established and funded with other people. It was a reasonable decision. Any guild would have the desire to grow. At first, there was a harmonious atmosphere. A few members joined for the fellowship, but there was a big meaning placed on the formation of raid groups. But Heaven's Will had grabbed the tile of best guild in South Korea. Many greedy people desired to touch it. Perhaps that was how Kim Yong-woo lost his title of guildmaster in my previous life. I could imagine what would happen if this situation continued. I organized my thoughts for a moment before saying, Yoon Hai and Lee Ji Hai? Kim Yong-woo explained this as well. Due to the atmosphere, they were sent back home. Their withdrawal is also pending. Entangling both situations, but I can do it now that Master Nim has returned. Do so. Isn't there a problem remaining in the guild? Those who created the factions. They are the cause of all this dissonance. That's right. It was mortifying but true. Kim Yong-woo's voice trembled. I said flatly, announce that the raid group Devil Hunters has returned. Write a list of those who will cause problems and hand them to me. Kim Yong-woo immediately looked at me. He was trying to figure out the meaning of my words. Kim Yong-woo had seen me hunt the Dark Warrior. He knew that my skills transcended dealing with 2 orcs. But I wasn't the type to help someone. Those with strength had declared neutrality. I had the attitude of not wanting to get involved in complicated matters. Kim Yong-woo nodded. I understand. What is the format of the new staff recruitment? There was nothing to hide. Kim Yong-woo responded fairly easily. An audition format. The Awakened had fully settled into society, so I thought it wouldn't be bad to create an entertainment program. Something like a common music audition program. But why? Kim Yong-woo asked why. I was curious about the audition. It wouldn't be bad to influence the people who would join the guild. Expansion of the personnel led to the formation of factions. Of course, their gazes would be focused on the audition. I want to become a special examiner. You want to participate in the audition as a judge? Is that impossible? Kim Yong-woo shook his head. No, I can add you at my discretion. Then I guess there isn't a problem. I smirked. It wouldn't be a bad surprise. Originally the spacious hall on the 2nd floor belonged to the Devil Hunters. It was now decorated and used for the audition. The 5 judges sitting on a white table were like celebrities in Heaven's Will. This was being shown on TV, so the hopefuls had a strong desire to be recruited. Number 362. What skills do you have? One of the examiners asked the large man wearing a name tag with 362 on it. Normal grade long jump, exceptional normal increase eyesight. I am faster than any creature. It's okay. Can you show us the long jump? Yes, it is possible. Try it. Number 362 took a deep breath. The man jumped approximately 6 meters with a large smile. It was good enough, but the expressions of the judges didn't seem pleased. Let's test your skill increase eyesight. Can you see these letters? The judge wrote down very small letters. It couldn't be seen unless the person was very close. Number 362 opened his mouth with a grumpy expression. It isn't visible. I understand. By the way, your physical stats seem a little low. The skills can't be utilized properly. Were you lying when you created your stats table? No. I will believe you. Then please wait for a little bit. The 5 judges started to write down their scores. The scoring determined who would enter. Skill utilization, reliability, stats and other factors were looked at in order to give a score out of 100. Those with an excellent grade would enter the second test. If they fought against a goblin or kobold and won, then they would pass. Those that gave a good impression would be drawn into the group of one of the 5 judges. But the number 362 awakened didn't need to worry about that. Next is number 363. You have a title? Foul-mouthed person? Number 363 was also a man. He scratched his head and muttered, "Haha, it turns out that I often curse." Well, it is great that you have a title. The skills are also unusual. Loud singing, low morale. What are the effects? If I yell loudly or swear at them, then they will flinch. Can I show you? It will affect people? The effect depends on your intelligence. In return, a lot of people will cry. I'm begging you to keep the level weak. There were many people in this hall. If he cursed, then everyone here might suffer mentally. Number 363 cleared his throat. Hey, these scum-like bastards should fuck off. Ho. It lasted a few seconds. Great confidence. The eyes of everyone, including number 363, turned towards the entrance. A pale man was standing next to the guildmaster, Kim Yong-woo. The man who gave a mocking laugh was handsome. The judges were watching the man more than the guildmaster. Rather, the guild mater didn't even enter their eyes. At the same time, their eyes were filled with amazement. It was like they were meeting a ghost. That jerk? Number 363 frowned. He had seen that guy at the entrance. He had seen it. Number 363 had roughly cursed and insulted him. The man with black skin had handled 3 guild members, and now the person accompanying him was with the guild master. That bastard? What is it? Number 363's blood quickly cooled. The atmosphere instantly changed as Kim Yong-woo and I entered. It felt like cold water had been poured on them. I laughed as I received the attention of the 5 judges and dozens of applicants. Especially the judges. They were individuals of Heaven's Will that had appeared on TV several times. Looking at their reaction, they didn't seem to welcome my appearance. The judges received this assignment because they had influence. Was this the so-called political arena? It was obvious that Kim Yong-woo's presence in the guild was less than I expected. The guild master of Heaven's Will, Kim Yong-woo. I came, so why are you so panicked? Kim Yong-woo cleared his throat a few times before saying, Guild master. Wah, it is really Kim Yong-woo. It is the first time I'm really seeing him. Unlike the judges, the participants looked at Kim Yong-woo like they saw a miracle. Although his position had diminished in the guild, he was still the guild master of Heaven's Will. Currently one of the most famous people in South Korea. Then Kim Yong-woo introduced me. Thank you for your welcome. But I am not the hero of today. The main character is this man right here. He is the leader of the raid group Devil Hunters, Randolph Briggseel Nim. Kim Yong-woo reached out to me as he spoke. He was one of the 12 members who cleared the first clear and had the most achievements. The story of him fighting 2 orcs alone is famous throughout the guild. That is enough for him to qualify as a special judge. Wait a minute, guild master. Shouldn't we receive advance notice if there is going to be a special judge? The faces of the judges changed dramatically. It was evidence of their recent influence in the guild, and it would continue to have an impact afterwards. The new members would remember and inevitably follow one of the judges. Now a new person was going to sit in that position? In addition, he was the leader of the raid group Devil Hunters? It was ridiculous. Moreover, the dormant Devil Hunters had been directly mentioned by the guild master. It was a formal announcement that he was resurrecting it. The captain who was thought dead had returned, but they hadn't thought it was possible due to the current situation of the guild. It didn't matter how strong the captain was. The guild master was already wounded. It would be different a month ago, but now he was a stranded boat. However, Kim Yong-woo just laughed. And he restored the atmosphere. In other words, Devil Hunters was Kim Yong-woo's last card. After a few months, he would have been deprived of his guild master seat at the General Assembly. Until now he hadn't resisted. This matter was just decided today. And wouldn't an objective assessment proceed better with 6 people instead of 5? The faces of the judges cracked. Are you saying that we are unable to evaluate properly, Guild Master? You are good, but isn't the captain of Devil Hunters influential? He has sufficient qualifications. That is just a story. The judges' expressions were filled with ridicule. I had participated in the raid to clear the first floor. Now people had showed up with 1 or 2 rare skills, so it was nonsense to judge people based on the past. The captain and members of Devil Hunters would be free from the guild's influence. This wouldn't benefit the guild. Actually, a lot of people thought that Devil Hunters was favored due to the captain have a rare grade skill. Kim Yong-woo sneaked a glance at me. I nodded and he gave a dark smile. The judges who didn't participate in the raid of the first floor might not understand. Okay. Then let's do this. First Randolph will have the right to be a special judge. Then I will arrange a place to check the qualifications. A place? Many members were dead set against Devil Hunters. The majority of guild members had a backlash against the name. It was worth a listen. A tournament? A raid group composed of 8 people with spar with each other. That place will be used to determine whether Devil Hunters disappears or not. In contrast, if they win, then Devil Hunters will be a raid group given preferential treatment. This will also solve the ranking issue dividing the group. So what do you think? A potentially great work. This was Kim Yong-woo's plan. The guild was divided, so this was an attempt to manage it. I noticed Kim Yong-woo's intentions. The introduction of rankings? His head seemed to work quite well. If I won, then the power would tilt towards Kim Yong-woo. This was a golden chance to solidify his position. The current balance between the factions would have no choice but to fall. It was based on an intuitive measure of my strength. A gamble based on my victory. It isn't even a gamble. I shrugged. It would be enough if the tournament was a solo exhibition. It was organized for 8 people, but they would just be background noise. Kim Yong-woo calculated that I could defeat 8 people. He was convinced, but he underestimated me. I will put together a temporary crew here. And by participating as a judge, I could gather the remaining members. I would pull in some new hires of the guild. If I added Lee Ji-hai, Yoon-hai and Krasla, there were 4 people. But Krasla was in a different class. I didn't need to add more people after Krasla. I nodded my head, but it was good that he thought of such a thing in a short amount of time. It would be good if Kim Yong-woo was a little more intimidating, but... In fact, Kim Yong-woo lacked social skills. It was the reason why his side became like this. It was a funny thing, but I was also to blame. Will you make a formal announcement? One of the judges asked, and Kim Yong-woo replied positively. Of course. The details will be determined in an emergency meeting tomorrow. I'll just tell you in advance. Of course, this story might not matter to some people. Each of the 5 judges were influential. If they agreed, then the entire guild would. Okay. I accept. There are no objections. All 5 judges accepted the offer. Then Kim Yong-woo formally introduced me again. The special judge, Captain of Devil Hunters Randolph Briggseel Nim. Now, let's welcome him with applause. Clap, clap, clap. Kim Yong-woo clapped first and the judges reluctantly followed. The prospective recruits had watched dumbly, but they sensed the atmosphere and clapped. I am Randolph Briggseel. Thank you. My first words were very heavy. Number 363. A man with a title about cursing. I sat in a chair and used mind's eye. Name: Kim Chun-won. Occupation: hero, bard. Title: foul-mouthed person. R. Magic power +4. Stats: Strength 24, Intelligence 33. Agility 35, Stamina 36. Magic power 38, +4. Potential: 166 325. Uniqueness: none. Skill: loud singing. N. Low morale, XN. Is the low morale skill related to cursing? Number 363, Kim Chun-won nodded with surprise. Yes? Ah, yes. That's correct. This is a skill. I never intended to swear. And what is the loud singing skill? Song? It seemed to be related to the bard occupation. Try it out for me. I was the only one who paid attention to him. The other judges already had no expectations for Kim Chun-won. Kim Chun-won sensed that the atmosphere was good and his confidence increased. Soul under the sky tilde the sky. My dream came closer. Kek, da. The outcome was determined the moment I heard his voice. The voice was so loud that some people even blocked their ears. The 5 judges sighed or rubbed their foreheads. Nothing could be seen from my facial expressions. Scoring began and I made an assessment of Kim Chun-won. An assessment of skills, skill utilization, reliability, stats and confidence. I gave satisfactory points in all areas. It was a ridiculous and wildly subjective scorecard. If it wasn't for me, then number 363 might have failed. But I didn't mind. Rather, that's what I hoped for. I would only give good points to those about to fail. If they passed due to my scores, then they would follow me. Anyway, the number 8 was just a pretext. I only needed rough members. Frankly, just having Krasla was enough. There was no need to bother with anyone else. This has its own fun. Scoring human beings. I thought it was quite an interesting entertainment. I continued to give extremely subjective scores. A piece of paper posted on the bulletin board on the first floor of Heaven's Will. Despite how busy they were, the words were enough to capture the attention of all guild members. It was the flyer associated with the competition. Tournament name, Heaven's Will. A meeting that would take place in exactly 1 month in order to determine the fate of members of Heaven's Will. The qualifications and number of participants, preferences given to the winners and the introduction of rankings were all written on that sheet. It was planned after an impromptu meeting, but it flowed smoothly. Everyone who attended the audition already knew about it from Kim Yong-woo's words. It was passed down through the 5 judges. It was no wonder that the plan passed. The people in the guild wanted to show off their skills. The dungeon was unable to fill this thirst. This was an opportunity to them. Those who believed their skills were undervalued, new guild members, or those who wanted to raise their position in the guild. Furthermore, the eyesore that was the Devil Hunters would participate. Approximately 1 week passed. The tournament of the Heaven's Will Guild was a hot story. There was an instant reaction to the post. 8 people? Then we have the strongest group. All the existing members. This time, there are 2 new hires with terrible skills. This is not a game. Leader Kim Tae-won, will you participate? Didn't we follow you through the hell training? And none of them expected Devil Hunters to succeed. Krasla might have defeated 3 members at the entrance, but apart from him and Randolph, the remaining 6 were trash. They wouldn't be able to do anything against the Awakened with rare grade skills. Those 6 trash weren't even calculated in the first place. It was unthinkable that they couldn't defeat such a configuration.